Chapter 4202. Suemo got out of the car. He held her hand and said in a low voice when Suemo got out of the car, "I don't intend to keep my marriage a secret, Suemo." She was stunned for a moment before realizing what he meant. She smiled gently and said, "Okay." It was a simple word, but it made her stand clear. She was on his side because they were married. With his age and experience, there was no need for him to hide anymore. He would not hide her in the dark, and then he would be with another woman. He did not want Suemo to suffer anymore. He wanted to tell all his fans that Suemo was his wife and the person he loved. In the future, everything he did, Kong Qiao, would be for Suemo's happiness. When they appeared hand in hand, the scene was a little out of control. Fans were screaming and crying. The host was also stunned. She knew that Suemo would come, but she did not expect it to be in such a way. Wasn't Kong Qiao a little too impulsive? Kong Qiao walked to the front of the stage and picked up the microphone. He said calmly, "Thank you, everyone, for your support over the years. As for the storm on the internet, I just want to say that Suemo and I have been together for many years. I have liked her for many years. Now that she is my wife, I reserve my legal rights against some false rumors. I hope that everyone will love my wife and my future boss, Suemo, as well as you love me." Suemo was stunned for a moment. Kong Qiao said in a low voice, "I only changed the name of Noon under your name. It's a wedding gift, Mrs. Kong. In the future, other than old cured meat, you can also have countless little fresh meats. But you can only look at them and not touch them." Suemo stared at him. "Kong Qiao. If this can make you have more confidence in our marriage, I don't mind doing anything," he said in a low and hoarse voice. There was even a hint of emotion in his voice. Then, he pulled her shoulders and murmured, "I love you, Suemo." After that, he kissed her. In front of countless cameras and his fans, he admitted that he had slept with Suemo before. He had always loved Suemo, and now, the person he loved was his wife. The news of Kong Qiao and Suemo's marriage immediately became a trending topic. And that Karzi also became famous once again. There were even people who calculated Kong Qiao's endurance based on the time and the degree of the car's subsidence. It could be said that he was very strong. In any case, Kong Qiao, this old cured meat, had his ability X spread far and wide. This was also something that Kong Qiao had not expected. However, they were already married, and others could say whatever they wanted. He did not care, and neither did Suemo. But he couldn't see his face. Wanyan watched in a daze from afar. She finally admitted that Kong Qiao fell in love with Suemo. Kong Qiao was no longer the Kong Qiao of the past. He was no longer the Kong Qiao who yearned for something, because he had obtained everything he wanted. Now, Suemo was his everything. Wanyan looked on quietly. She had dressed very well today and was very presentable. She lost. Between career and love, Concho chose love. She had never understood why Kong Qiao would like Suemo. He was obviously very ordinary, and she could not see any good points. Wanyan walked over slowly and looked at Kong Qiao with a smile. There was a tinge of bitterness in her smile. "You knew that I did it, why didn't you retaliate?" she said. Kong Qiao's hand was still holding Suemo's. He turned his head to look at Wanyan, his gaze a little deep. After a long time, he said in a low voice, "Because you helped me before." She wanted to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, husband, addicted to pampering. On WeChat, she followed Yudu literature. Talking about life, looking for bosom friends. Chapter 4203. Because of Kong Qiao's words, Wanyan was a little teary-eyed. She lowered her eyes and whispered after a long time, "I lost." The one she lost was not Kong Qiao, but Suemo, because Suemo made Kong Qiao change. In the past, Kong Qiao was not like this. He was not a person who easily reconciled, but now, he easily forgave. It was the warmth of love and family that softened him. After being in the entertainment industry for so many years, Kong Qiao finally returned to the Kong Qiao of the past because of love. She remembered the Kong Qiao of the past was very beautiful. That was why so many people liked him, not because of his persona, but because of his character. Later on, he had a persona, and now he didn't care about it anymore. This was the real Kong Qiao. Wanyan finally put it down and said with trembling lips, "Congratulations, Kong Qiao. After so many years, you finally found what you wanted." Kong Qiao smiled. "Thank you." With such a smile, he finally felt relieved. Wanyan hugged him and Suemo respectively and said in a choked voice, "You must invite me to your wedding. I'm a big shot. After all, I've earned a lot of money from Kong Qiao all these years." Kong Qiao didn't say anything, but Suemo did. When Wanyan left, Mr. Kong glanced at Mrs. Kong. "You are so generous. You don't mind?" "Because I don't plan to hold a public wedding." Suemo smiled. We're already living together, and I've already received Mom's gift for our first meeting. Also, all of your money is under my name, so what's the point of holding a wedding? He reached out and pinched her face. I hope you don't have any other reasons. I promise I didn't. Suemo held his arm and rested her head on his shoulder, smiling sweetly. Even if I did, I wouldn't be able to tell you. Kang Qiao smiled and walked into the banquet hall with her in his arms. He was the main character, so he was the center of attention. Suemo didn't mind. Being an artist meant that he wasn't her husband outside, and she could understand it very well. She let him communicate with his former colleagues and some big shots, while she took her things and sat in the corner. Kang Qiao was afraid that she would be left out, so she came over to see her from time to time. Suemo said indifferently, "You can do your own thing." He smiled and went back to his work. Now that he thought about it, he and Suemo were indeed suitable in many aspects. Later on, Chin-mo came as well. Naturally, he was also the center of attention. He and Kang Qiao were surrounded by many female celebrities. They were either there for resources or for sex. Just in time, He-hwan came over. After making a round, she came to Sumo's place. Suemo sat on the sofa with her and handed her a plate full of food. "This is for you. I saw you coming just now. I guess you won't stay there for long." He-hwan accepted her kindness and ate absent-mindedly. She smiled and said, "You heard about it too?" Suemo was taken aback for a moment before smiling. "I see. Actually, it doesn't matter. What matters is that both parties feel comfortable." In this day and age, divorce was actually not a big deal. If the couple really loved each other, they could remarry at any time. She was just afraid that Chin-mo could not control his lower body. If that happened, it would be difficult to clean up the mess. It was up to He-hwan. From Sumo's point of view, He-hwan and Rong-yu would not end up together. In between, He-hwan got married and had a child. They had not been together for a few years, and they did not make it clear in the past. The distance between them was more than thousands of miles. She thought for a moment and said, "But He-hwan, no matter what, I hope that you will be loyal to your heart at all times. Don't be angry. You see, Kang Qiao and I are together now. We didn't have a good relationship before, so I don't like him anymore." Chapter 4204. Suemo scrunched her nose and whispered, "He's a mess." He-hwan had always been abroad and was in the entertainment circle, so how could she not know? However, she pretended not to know. "Really? See, you can act too, He-hwan." Suemo laughed. "Tell me, who is the worst at acting in front of, the person you don't want to act the most, and the person you like the most?" He-hwan rolled her eyes. "I didn't know you were so eloquent. He-hwan, whose lobbyist are you?" "What lobbyist? Isn't it too late to talk about it when you're already divorced?" Suemo sighed. "I just feel pity for the two of you. You two are clearly a good match." He-hwan shook her head and picked up a glass of red wine. "Our personalities aren't compatible. I might not be a girl's personality and he's overbearing, so we can't get along." They were closest to love when He-hwan fell in love with Chin-mo. At that time, he hadn't been disappointed in her. However, a woman appeared in the middle of it all. After seeing them in the hospital, she couldn't love him anymore. Because when they made love, she would sometimes open her eyes and think of the scene where he took that woman to have an abortion. He said that it wasn't his child, but he had no proof. He had even protected that woman abroad and had the best resources overseas. He-hwan had met that woman a few times abroad, but that woman treated her as if she didn't exist and never spoke to her. There was one time when she was directing a film with that woman's name, but He-hwan refused to direct it. Chin-mo had called her, and she had hung up immediately after hearing what he had to say. After that, they hadn't seen each other for a year. She hadn't returned to B-City, and when he went to America, she had avoided him. Later, she heard that he had a French meal with that woman, and he had even stayed at that woman's apartment for 2 days. This matter was left unsettled. He-hwan didn't ask about it because she gave up on the marriage. Of course, she didn't want to be with Rong-yu either. She just felt that there was still a beautiful part in her heart and that there was still a pure part of her life. He-hwan admitted that she yearned for the pure and beautiful part of the past. Being with Chin-mo was exciting, but it was also very painful. She couldn't explain why she liked him. Maybe it started from the time they were in bed, or maybe he was handsome and charming. It wasn't hard to like him, but it was hard to make a mature, charming, and successful man stay faithful to her forever. When they couldn't even make do with each other, they couldn't go on. In fact, He-hwan knew that the biggest problem between them was not Rong-yu, but Chin-mo and that woman. Perhaps, she said marriage reluctantly, but she couldn't really do it. Unreconciled, unforgiving, unreconciled. However, she did not regret it. However, he felt guilty towards He-hwan. She was unhappy. She was used to living alone, but now when she went home, she always felt that something was missing. She didn't miss Chin Mo. After all, it was an adult love. It didn't matter if she was busy with work or not. However, she really missed Yi-Hwan. She couldn't go to the Chin residence every day to see her. Yi-Hwan never knew that it was so hard to be separated from Yi-Hwan. She had never felt this way when she was abroad for a year and a half. Her mother persuaded her to try and get Yi-Hwan over, but Yi-Hwan thought about it again and again and decided not to. Chapter 4205. She vaguely knew that if she took Yi-Hwan, even if Chin Mo was willing to let her go, he wouldn't let her off. Therefore, her heart ached every day. Her apartment was very big and she had asked someone to decorate a children's room, but she also knew that Yi-Hwan might not even be able to stay here for one night, because Chin Mo's agreement stated that she couldn't take care of Yi-Hwan for more than 8 hours. After the marriage ended, he was very bossy when it came to raising and visiting Yi-Hwan, but Yi-Hwan couldn't find a word to refute because she had neglected Yi-Hwan for several years, and it was indeed better for Chin Mo and the Chin family to take care of her. Her mother arranged a blind date for her, saying that if she got married and had a child, she wouldn't think like this anymore. Yi-Hwan didn't want to have a child, and she didn't want to love anyone anymore. Maybe she just couldn't endure seeing him. Thinking about it, she drank the red wine in the glass in one gulp. Her face was a little red, and her short black hair made her look even more delicate. She had always been good-looking, but she didn't dress up too much. Most of the time, she wore neutral clothes. Tonight, she was wearing a black Hepburn evening gown and jewelry, looking very dazzling. In Sumo's opinion, Yi-Hwan's face was better than Yuan's, but she was a little thinner. However, being thinner naturally gave her a different beauty. Now, Yi-Hwan didn't look like Director He at all. Instead, she looked like a petite girl, not a woman who had a child. She drank a little too much, probably because she was in a bad mood. Mo quietly accompanied her until Chin Mo walked over, and then he went to find Kong Chiao to avoid suspicion. Yi-Hwan leaned against the back of the sofa and saw Chin Mo. Her eyes narrowed to a slit. "It's you." Chin Mo reached out and took the glass she had drunk from. He asked calmly, "Why did you drink?" Yi-Hwan smiled faintly. "Guess." She looked very friendly and soft, not aggressive at all. Chin Mo couldn't help but be gentle. In a bad mood? She shifted and rested her head on his shoulder. Her hand went around to the back of his head and gently stroked his dark hair. Rarely had she been so gentle with him, so womanly. Chin Mo's body tensed up, and he said in a hoarse voice, "You drank too much." Yi-Hwan buried her face in his neck and giggled. "I'm not drunk." He looked at her silently. "And you said you weren't drunk." As a man and a woman who had just divorced, they should keep their distance. Although they hadn't announced it officially, he should also stay away from her personally. He didn't want to be poisoned by Yi-Hwan again. However, he didn't move at all and let her lean on him. He even thought bitterly that she could only lean on him like this after drinking. Normally, she was actually very afraid of him. Because he had been rough with her once. Chin Mo said calmly, "I'll send you back." Yi-Hwan put her arms around his neck and shook her head gently. "No. My mom asked me to have another child so that I won't miss Yi-Hwan. Let's have another child. You can take care of Yi-Hwan, and the child will belong to me. What do you think?" Yi-Hwan said silly words. Chin Mo's body stiffened. Suddenly, he realized why she had been drinking and why she was slightly drunk. Yi-Hwan still couldn't let go of Yi-Hwan. She was the one who gave birth to Yi-Hwan. It wasn't that she didn't love her, but she didn't know how to love her after not getting along with her for a long time. Their divorce made Yi-Hwan feel guilty, as if she didn't want Yi-Hwan anymore. Chapter 4206. She didn't feel guilty for the past few years because they were still married. Now that they were divorced, she couldn't make up for it. Chin Mo felt bad for a moment. He felt uncomfortable and his Adam's apple moved slightly. "Yi-Hwan, we can't have children after we're divorced." Her body stiffened, but she still hugged his neck and asked in a low voice, "If you get married and have children, can you give me Yi-Hwan? I don't have to get married." Chin Mo closed his eyes. "If I get married, I won't have children." It was probably because he was angry with her that he said such a thing. Yi-Hwan's eyes were a little warm. She was half drunk, but she could understand what he said. In this life, she could only be Yi-Hwan's mother for 8 hours. Maybe in the future when Chin Mo got married, it would be inconvenient for her to see him even if she wanted to. She was sad, she was in pain, and it was all caused by Chin Mo. She clenched her fists and hit his shoulder a few times. She murmured, "Chin Mo, you are so cruel." "Same here." He smiled bitterly and pushed her away with one hand. "There are so many people here. Don't forget yourself, Director He. You really don't have to act in front of me just to see Yi-Hwan. You're drunk, but you're not drunk. You just want to soften my heart, right? Hee-hwan leaned against the sofa and closed her eyes. Her red lips were slightly opened and her voice was hoarse. It was very tempting. You've seen through Chin Mo. You're still so good. Chin Mo's face suddenly became very ugly. He really wanted to strangle her. Then, he smiled coldly. If you like children so much, you can have one with Rongyu. This was another angry sentence. Hee-hwan opened her eyes and looked at him quietly. Then she whispered, do you hate me very much? Chin Mo was so annoyed that he wanted to smoke, but he resisted. I think so. She closed her eyes again and chuckled softly. Unfortunately, so am I. As she smiled, she felt very uncomfortable. She said that she had to go to the washroom, so she had to excuse herself. Chin Mo looked at her back view and felt that she was really fucking a fucking dog. Just then, he received a call from his mother, saying that Hee-hwan wasn't feeling well. She didn't have a fever, just that she was not feeling well. She was making a lot of noise and especially wanted her father and mother. Chin Mo frowned as he heard his mother say, can you ask Hee-hwan to come home with you to visit Hee-hwan? Although you are divorced, it's only right for you to look after your child together since you haven't found anyone to look after her. You didn't look for anyone? Chin Mo felt that he was being cheated on. His wife had always had someone else in her heart, and this was called not looking for the right person? However, since Hee-hwan wasn't feeling well, he was still willing to ask Hee-hwan to go back with him. Moreover, Hee-hwan was there. Didn't she just say that she couldn't bear to part with the child? Let's see if she's telling the truth. Chin Mo went to find Hee-hwan and went straight to the washroom. When Hee-hwan came out of the washroom, her eyes were a little red. When she saw Chin Mo, she looked down and said, I'll ask the driver to pick me up. Hee-hwan is sick. My mother asked us to go back and see her. It's up to you whether you want to go or not. Chin Mo said expressionlessly. Hee-hwan was stunned and immediately asked, what's the problem? I don't know. I'll find out when I go back. Chin Mo whispered. Let's go. Hee-hwan still went with him. When they walked to the door, Chin Mo took off his coat and put it on her shoulders. His action was a little rough. Why are you wearing dresses like others? Wasn't it good before? She wasn't surprised that he didn't like her. Hee-hwan didn't say anything, but she was nervous in the car. Chapter 4207. Chin Mo drove and said faintly, if you had been so worried about Hee-hwan since she was born, we wouldn't be in this situation today. Hee-hwan leaned against the back of the seat and murmured, Chin Mo, do you think it's useful to say this? She didn't want to talk to him and felt very sad, so she bit her fist and looked out of the window. He turned his head and looked at her. It seemed that she was really sad, so he didn't say anything and stepped on the accelerator. It took less than an hour to reach home. Fortunately, Chin Chen had already come to see her. She was just scared and in a bad mood. She got hurt. This conclusion made Yi Liangqiu and Qin Anlin a little confused. How could such a small person get hurt? Behind them, Qin Chen whispered, Mom, Dad, do you really think that Chin Mo and Hee-hwan got divorced and Hee-hwan didn't notice it at all? She was living in Chin Mo's place before, but now she was sent here like a left-behind child. Yi Liangqiu sighed softly and looked at Qin Anlin secretly. Qin Anlin touched his nose and said, it was Chin Mo's fault. He hurt his wife like that and still has the face to ask for a divorce. Shouldn't a normal man kneel and beg for forgiveness? Qin Chen smiled and said, Dad, Chin Mo's character is like yours. Qin Anlin looked at his daughter with a complicated look and said, I kneel a lot of eggs, ask your mother. Yi Liangqiu rolled her eyes at him and then asked Qin Chen gently, tell me, how do you treat Hee-hwan's illness? Hee-hwan has no sense of security. To put it bluntly, she needs her parents, or she will suffer some psychological damage. Mom, Dad, I will talk to Chin Mo and Hee-hwan about this. They don't want their children to live a painful life. Qin Chen said seriously. Yi Liangqiu heard that it was quite serious and looked at her husband worriedly from time to time. Qin Anlin loved his wife very much. He touched his nose and said, okay, I will talk to this little bastard. Yi Liangqiu was relieved and thought that it would be better if Chin Mo brought Hee-hwan with him. She was worried for a while and immediately went to accompany Hee-hwan, for fear that the little person would be sad when she woke up. Alas, she took care of the child and gritted her teeth at the two big ones. So when Chin Mo and Hee-hwan came over, they felt a little guilty, especially after Qin Chen said it. Hee-hwan went to accompany the child, so Qin Chen and Chin Mo talked alone in the study. Qin Chen whispered, Brother, Hee-hwan's illness is not serious. If she can't get over it for a while, I am afraid that she will have a psychological disease in the future. You will regret it later. Not to mention finding a second love, you will probably be busy taking care of Hee-hwan all the time. Chin Mo smoked and asked, what should we do? Hee-hwan is too nervous, so she has some mental disorders. Medicine can be used, but a relatively safe environment is more important. Qin Chen whispered. Qin Mo frowned, you mean that I should remarry He Huan? You are divorced. How can you be so childish? Qin Chen smiled, but as parents, you should make some sacrifices for your children. I suggest that you build a new relationship with He Huan and bring He Huan to live with you temporarily. He Huan can live there for a while and she can also go to film. You can take He Huan to visit her and let He Huan feel that you and your husband have a good relationship. Qin Mo frowned, can we pretend like this forever? She will know sooner or later. After this age, it will be much better when she is 8 or 9. Qin Chen smiled, it's up to you guys to decide. Brother, don't forget that you were the one who wanted to give birth to He Huan. You were the one who forced He Huan to do so. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 4208. Qin Mo didn't say anything. He just walked to the French window and smoked quietly. Qin Chen walked over, stood beside him, and patted him on the shoulder. Second brother, I know what you're thinking, but think more about He Huan, even if it's just a pretense, okay? Qin Mo turned his head to look at his sister, and then smiled bitterly. He looked up and sighed. Chen, brother, you, me, and Qin Mu are all worried. Qin Chen smiled slightly. We're all fine now. In fact, I really don't think you and He Huan have reached that point, unless you don't like her anymore. The eyes couldn't lie. In Qin Mo's eyes, there was still only He Huan. Qin Mo glanced at her and didn't say anything more. He put out the cigarette. I'm going to see He Huan. Take He Huan back tonight. Qin Chen's voice was a little tense. Brother, or you'll regret it in the future. Unless you don't want He Huan anymore and want to have another one. Qin Mo looked at her and couldn't say anything for a long time. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, really? Qin Chen didn't say anything, but his expression was a little serious. Whether it was true or not, he had to think about it himself. Qin Mo's jaw tightened, and he quickly walked to He Huan's bedroom. As for Qin Chen, he poured himself a glass of red wine and smiled. In fact, her acting skills were not bad, and she really coaxed Qin Mo and He Huan. Thinking about it, she couldn't help laughing. But thinking that if she was exposed in the future, she might have to hide abroad for a while. Of course, she told Lan Yu about it, and Lan Yu taught her a lesson that night, the kind that broke her skin and flesh. Qin Chen went back, and the villa was silent. He Huan woke up, looked at her mother with her big eyes, and threw herself into He Huan's arms, sobbing. Mom. He Huan felt sad and hugged the little guy. Tears welled up in He Huan's big black eyes. She bit her lips and said, Huan wants to go home. I want my parents. He Huan was in a dilemma. She and Qin Mo were divorced. How could they live together? At this moment, Qin Mo came over and hugged He Huan and kissed her. He said hoarsely, Daddy will take you home. Aren't you leaving too, Mommy? He Huan lay on her father's shoulder, staring at He Huan with her big eyes. Qin Mo said in a low voice, I'm not leaving. Mommy and I will bring He Huan home in a while. Now, be good and let Grandma help you get dressed, okay? Yi Liangqiu was also shocked. What was going on? Qin Mo gestured for her to help He Huan put on her clothes while he called He Huan out. In the corridor, he told her what Qin Chen said, and then looked at her quietly, your decision. He Huan was silent for a long time, and then asked hoarsely, do I have a choice? She didn't say anything more. She went back to the room and held He Huan in her arms. Then she said to Yi Liangqiu, Mom, we'll go back first. Yi Liangqiu was very surprised. After a while, she warned her son with her eyes not to mess around. After the three of them left, she leaned on Qin Anlin and said, I don't know what's going on with them. Why did He Huan agree to go back with Qin Mo? Qin Anlin looked at his wife and said speechlessly, you have to ask what Qin Chen said to Qin Mo. I don't think it's Qin Mo who wants to deceive He Huan. They were all deceived by Qin Chen. He must have used He Huan to talk about it. As parents, they gave in and lived together again. You see, Su Chang will ask for an explanation. Yi Liangqiu was surprised. Chapter 4209. Qin Anlin glanced at his wife and said, you're not well informed. Su Chang has already started looking for blind dates for He Huan. Qin Mo is in his 30s, so he's not in a hurry because he's a man. However, He Huan is different. A woman's youth is limited. Think about it, how can Su Chang not be anxious? Yi Liangqiu sighed and didn't know what to say. She really couldn't see through the relationship between these two kids. If she said that they didn't have each other in their hearts, it was obvious that there was a chance, but they still broke up. She didn't know if this was a good thing or a bad thing. She was most afraid that they would hurt each other in the future. Yi Liangqiu was very conflicted, but Qin Anlin comforted her. Children have their own blessings. No one can run away. Look at the other kids. They're even worse than them, but they're still fine. Actually, none of my kids beat their wives. Chin Mo is a jerk. Yi Liangqiu snorted coldly. Anyway, if he continues to mess around, I won't help him. You want to put justice before family? Qin Anlin couldn't help but laugh. Look at you. You still hate evil as much as before. Now, you even hate your own son. Yi Liangqiu was silent for a while before she murmured, Anlin, Su Chang is to me like Lin Sisi is to Chen Chen. I can't pay back what I owe, so I can't bear to see her being tortured by Qin Mo. Although it's a private matter, I always feel guilty and feel that I've wronged Su Chang. Qin Anlin patted her on the shoulder. Don't think too much about it. He Huan is also an adult. She won't suffer too much at Qin Mo's hands. Come to think of it, our son has suffered a lot as well. You should feel sorry for him. Yi Liangqiu glanced at him and suddenly said, Actually, Qin Mo is the most like you. You're a jerk. Why are you talking about me? Qin Anlin touched his nose helplessly. Then, he coaxed his wife. At night, Qin Mo drove while Yi Huan hugged Yi Huan in the back seat. Yi Huan's eyes widened, and she asked every once in a while, Daddy, are we really going home? She asked 4 or 5 times because Aunt Qinchen told her that as long as she asked like this, her parents would definitely take her home, and they wouldn't dare to casually send her back to her grandmother's house. Looking at it now, it was indeed useful. Aunt Qinchen is so smart. Qin Mo looked at Yi Huan from time to time in the rearview mirror and said gently, Of course we're going back. As he spoke, his black eyes seemed to inadvertently sweep past Yi Huan. Yi Huan didn't say anything and just hugged Yi Huan. Little Yi Huan was very satisfied. Moreover, in her heart, Aunt Qinchen was the great sage, heaven's equal. She was omnipotent. Aunt Qinchen was handsome and had excellent medical skills. When she grew up, she wanted to marry someone like Aunt Qinchen. If Qin Mo knew about this, he would vomit blood. He immediately asked his sister to change back into women's clothes. She really flirted all day long and taught children bad things. On such a quiet night, Yi Huan spoke for a long time, and every word made Qin Mo's heart jump. He felt that he had to take care of this child himself, otherwise, there would be no regrets that he could make up for. The car stopped outside his apartment. He opened the door and went to the back to take Yi Huan. Then, he whispered, Take out a small suitcase from the trunk. It's filled with Yi Huan's pillow and doll. Yi Huan went to take it and went back to the apartment with him. Yi Huan fell asleep in his arms, and she was as quiet as a doll. After such a long time, Yi Huan was tired, and so was the adult. Chapter 42:10. Qin Mo put Yi Huan on the big bed in the master bedroom. When he lifted his body, he whispered, You will sleep here tonight. Yi Huan asked instinctively, You'll sleep in the guest room? Qin Mo straightened up and looked at her for a long time before saying, I'll sleep here too. He paused and said, I won't do anything to you. What we're doing now is to give Yi Huan a good environment. Think about it yourself. Yi Huan lowered her eyes and said in a hoarse voice, I can only agree to let you stay here for 2 days a week. Also, I want to sleep in separate beds. What do you think I can do with Yi Huan in between? And I'm not that desperate. He even said, I don't lack women. Yi Huan's face was a little pale. She stared at him for a few seconds and then walked to the bathroom. He said behind her, Your clothes are still here. Ignoring him, she removed her makeup and showered, washing away her tiredness. When she came out, she was wearing a set of conservative pajamas. It was a 2-piece set, but it made her look very petite. She crawled next to Yi Huan, dimmed the lights and didn't talk to him. Qin Mo stood for a while and went to take a shower. When he came out, Yi Huan's eyes were closed as if she was asleep, but he knew that she wouldn't fall asleep. She was afraid of the bed. It seemed normal when she lay down just now, but her body was stiff. He smiled awkwardly, lay flat, and then turned his body to look at little Yi Huan. The little girl was sleeping deeply, and her round head was so cute that he couldn't help kissing her. When he looked up, he saw Yi Huan looking at him. Their eyes met, and he said in a hoarse voice, When will you go to Sea City for filming? In a week. She said. Qin Mo closed his eyes and said, You'll stay here for a week, and I'll let you go after a week. Is that a condition? Yi Huan's voice was as cold as water in the night. Qin Mo, I hope you remember what you said. After that, she closed her eyes, as if she didn't want to talk to him anymore. Just as she was about to fall asleep, her hand was grasped by a firm big hand, so all her sleepiness disappeared. Moreover, she felt that the air around her was thin, as if she was going to suffocate at any time. Her heart was also beating rapidly, and it was very uncomfortable. No matter what, Yi Huan knew what this meant. She was afraid of him, afraid that he would get close to her. She wanted to move her hand away, but she couldn't move. Her body was frozen. Qin Mo watched her reaction. Then, he let go of her hand, and her body slowly relaxed. Neither of them said it, but they both knew it in their hearts. After that, Chin Mo didn't touch her again. They lived together, but no matter how much his body craved her, he didn't touch her at all. She wasn't the only one who couldn't let go of what had happened that night. He couldn't let go either. The night passed, and when Hee-hwan woke up, the three of them were on the same bed. It was like a dream to her. She stared at the ceiling for a long time before coming back to her senses. Chin Mo's voice rang out, "I'll send her to the nursery later. I'll send you wherever you go." She looked at him and found that he was awake, so she whispered, "I'll drive myself." Chin Mo didn't say anything and got up. "I'll make breakfast." Hee-hwan continued to lie down, feeling a little confused. They were divorced, and they hated each other, but they still had to lie in the same bed to sleep. She didn't sleep well last night, and her complexion was worse, but she didn't feel sleepy anymore. Chapter 42:11. Hee-hwan lifted the quilt to wash her face and brush her teeth. When she came back, Hee-hwan was awake. The little girl was sitting under the quilt with a doll in her hands. She was very cute. Hee-hwan went over and knelt on one leg by the bed. "Get dressed and get ready for school, okay?" Hee-hwan said coquettishly, "I don't want to go to school." Hee-hwan didn't know how to coax a child. She even thought that it was fine if Hee-hwan didn't want to go to school. It was a nursery anyway, and she was sick last night. Although she was away from home most of the time, women were always tolerant of their little girls. So she went to Chin Mo and discussed it. "Hee-hwan doesn't want to go to school today. Why don't I take care of her for the day? I don't have much to do today." Chin Mo was frying an egg. He was wearing a pair of black casual pants and a light-colored knitted top, which accentuated his long legs and strong figure. As he was making breakfast, he glanced at Hee-hwan and said disapprovingly, "You'll only spoil her." Hee-hwan bit her lip. She was sick last night. Chin Mo smiled. "She's not sick today." He was a very smart person, and he had spent a lot of time with Hee-hwan. He also had a certain understanding of his sister, Chin Chen. He was indeed stunned last night, but when he was making breakfast just now, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. If there was really a serious problem with Hee-hwan, Chin Chen wouldn't have left last night. He had been fooled. Hee-hwan should have just been shocked last night. Chin Chen said that she had an incurable disease. She had been asking for a beating since she was a child. But he wouldn't say that to Hee-hwan. On the one hand, he had told her about Chin Chen. If he clarified it now, it would seem that he was up to no good. On the other hand, it seemed that he didn't want to make it clear. There was nothing wrong with living 2 days a week. He didn't have a woman, and he didn't have any plans to get married. It was good to make things difficult for this heartless little thing. Before that, Chin Mo had already made a happy decision. Hee-hwan suddenly got angry. "Hee-hwan won't go to school today." Chin Mo placed the fried egg on the plate and looked down at Hee-hwan. Hee-hwan took a step back, but she managed to hold herself back and glared back at him. "Hee-hwan is not a boy. She doesn't need an elite education. I'm her mother. I have the right to decide if she wants to go to school today." After she said that, he said softly, "Then, you take care of her. Auntie will come over to cook lunch. Also, don't bring her out today. She might have caught a cold last night." With that, he shifted his chin. "Bring her over for breakfast. You can skip school, but you still have to eat breakfast." Hee-hwan was surprised. She didn't expect Chin Mo to be so easy to talk to. She quietly returned to the bedroom. Hee-hwan was bouncing up and down on the bed, shouting, "I don't want to go to school, I don't want to go to school." Hugging Hee-hwan, she said, "Mommy is the best. I don't have to go to school anymore." At that moment, Hee-hwan was at a loss. Chin Mo leaned against the door and said calmly, "Now you know, a loving mother leads to a prodigal son." Hee-hwan carried Hee-hwan down and bit her lip. "What's wrong with that? Look at Cher. She's living a good life." Chin Mo sneered. "That's because Yi Muyun spoils her. Her parents don't spoil her like that." Hee-hwan snorted. "Then I'll find someone for Hee-hwan. Xiangnan is not bad. He's a sweet boy." Chin Mo snorted. "No one in this world is worthy of our Hee-hwan." Hee-hwan said to Hee-hwan directly, "Your father wants you to stay single for the rest of your life." Chapter 42:12. What do you mean by being single? Does it mean that I don't have to go to school? Hee-hwan asked. After she asked, the two adults didn't know how to answer her. After a while, Chin Mo raised his chin and said, "Take her to breakfast." He couldn't help but add, "Don't teach her like that in the future." Hee-hwan bit her lip and said, "I didn't teach her like that. It's you." Chin Mo's eyes were a little clear. He looked at her quietly and then went out first. Hee-hwan was a little embarrassed to help Hee-hwan get dressed. Then she took her to brush her teeth and wash her face. Hee-hwan was very happy. Looking at such a cute little person, Yi-Hwan's originally gloomy mood was a lot better. She took the little fellow to have breakfast. Yi-Hwan was also very happy because she didn't have to go to school. While eating, she said very cleverly, Hwan will be single every day. As her father, he drank a mouthful of milk to calm himself down. He thought to himself, I'm the one who will be single now. After breakfast, when Yi-Hwan was cleaning up, Chin Mo sent Yi-Hwan away. Then he walked behind Yi-Hwan in the kitchen and almost stuck to her body. He said a little softly, since we can't let Yi-Hwan know, we should block the news of our divorce, at least for a few years. Yi-Hwan's hand paused. Then she slowly turned off the tap and looked at him sideways. It's fine as long as you don't explain. There's no need to deliberately show off. We don't have to attend public events together. Just try to avoid it. He understood what she meant. They still had to draw a line. He was afraid that it was not that simple. He was a little angry. His nose was blowing hot air. He approached her step by step and said in a hoarse voice, You and Rongyu. It has nothing to do with you. She leaned her body against the countertop and turned her head away. Chin Mo, you're the one who wants a divorce. Right now, we're only, barely getting along for the sake of happiness. However, there are no restrictions between us, legal or emotional. So, please don't ask about my affairs. Similarly, I won't ask about your private affairs either. Chin Mo looked at her condescendingly. After a while, he asked softly, Is this what you want to say to me? Yi-Hwan agreed. Chin Mo took 2 steps back and smiled faintly. You're right. You don't have to worry. I've said that I don't lack women. Don't worry, I won't do anything to you. Yi-Hwan put her hand on the countertop while Chin Mo looked at her deeply before leaving. The good atmosphere and mood were all gone. When he went to the company, he drove very fast. When he arrived at the company, he had a sour look on his face. Poor King Entertainment's upper management and middle management had to look at their boss's sour face the whole day. Yi-Hwan stayed in the condominium with Yi-Hwan. She was actually a little absent-minded. She didn't expect to come back so soon. He didn't really come back, but he took care of Yi-Hwan. Yi-Hwan was very happy. She didn't have any illness anymore. She played with the doll at home. On the other hand, Yi-Hwan opened her laptop and searched for what Chin Mo had said about Yi-Hwan's situation. After searching for a long time, she found a set of questions and helped Yi-Hwan do it. At first, Yi-Hwan was willing. She answered in a childish voice as she played with her favorite toy. But then she wrinkled her little nose and said, What an idiotic question. Yi-Hwan's face froze. This set of questions was created by the world's most famous psychologist. Now that Yi-Hwan said it was an idiotic question, what kind of answer was that? She wanted to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, hubby, addicted to pampering. On WeChat, she followed Yudu literature. Talk about life and find a confidant. Chapter 42:13. She couldn't answer and just looked at Yi-Hwan. Yi-Hwan sat in her arms and gave her favorite toy, Mama, let's play this together. Yi-Hwan felt that this toy was a little stupid. Anyway, she had a good time later. At noon, the auntie made delicious food. The two of them were full and lay in bed together. Yi-Hwan's little belly was round and cute. Yi-Hwan looked at the little fellow sideways, covered her with a thin quilt and coaxed her to take a nap. Yi-Hwan curled up in her arms and asked in a daze, Mama, you won't leave again, will you? Yi-Hwan felt a pain in her heart and reached out to rub her hair. I'll come back to accompany you when I'm not working, okay? Yi-Hwan hugged her neck and tilted her little head. Yi-Hwan felt a burst of softness in her heart, an indescribable feeling. Yi-Hwan was the only softness in her marriage with Chin Mo. Everything else wasn't good, and Yi-Hwan wasn't the kind of woman who couldn't let go. If he wanted to divorce her after being rough with her, it would be fine. She could turn around and not drag things out. She wouldn't say that she hated him to the core to the point of meeting her enemies. After all, they still had a child. Now they were going to live together again. She just regarded herself as Yi-Hwan's mother and treated Yi-Hwan well. If Chin Mo wanted to treat her like before, she would never agree. They actually had nothing to do with each other. Yi-Hwan gently patted Yi-Hwan's little body and whispered, In a week, I will go to another place to shoot a film. Can I come back to see you once in half a month? Is it far? Yi-Hwan had not fallen asleep. She suddenly arched her little head and asked. Yi-Hwan said, Yes, by plane. I'll go to see you with Dad. Yi-Hwan's voice was very soft. She was really sleepy, but she wanted to talk to her mother. She loved talking to her mother the most. If she could, she wanted to hug her mother and talk to her father forever. That way, the baby would be very, very happy. After hearing what Yi-Hwan said, Yi-Hwan was stunned. She looked at Yi-Hwan and didn't say anything for a long time. Yi-Hwan had fallen asleep. Her little face was calm, and her eyelashes were like two little fans hanging down, making her look very cute. Shushy, her facial features were exquisite, somewhat resembling Hee-hwan, but more resembling Chin Mo. Hee-hwan stretched out her hand and gently traced the little fellow's facial features. Her heart was full of pain. The reason why she agreed to meet Chin Mo was because of Hee-hwan, and she didn't want to look for someone else for the time being. Men were not that important to her. That was how she had been through all these years. Hee-hwan smelled the scent on Hee-hwan's body and slowly fell asleep. In the dream, there was no script. In the dream, she did not argue with Chin Mo, nor did she see Chin Mo with another woman in the obstetrics and gynecology department. In the dream, there was no upcoming blind date. In the dream, there was only the freedom of youth. At that time, Rongyu had not yet become a vegetable, and Chin Mo had not confessed to her. At that time, she was very happy and lived freely. When she woke up in the afternoon, Hee-hwan's head was a little groggy. When she reached out to touch her forehead, she realized that her forehead was a little hot. When she tried to prop herself up, all her bones were a little sore. "Mom." A soft voice sounded beside her ear. Hee-hwan opened her eyes. Hee-hwan lay beside her and looked at her pitifully. "Mommy is sick." Hee-hwan forced a smile. After smiling, she felt even more pain all over her body. How did Hee-hwan know? She wanted to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, hubby, addicted to pampering. On WeChat, she followed Yudu literature, talking about life and looking for bosom friends. Chapter 42:14. Mommy's body is so hot. The baby is asking daddy to come home. Hee-hwan lay on the side and said proudly. She seemed to be saying that the baby knew how to take care of mommy. How capable. Hee-hwan was a little surprised. She looked to the side and didn't see Chin Mo. Daddy is in the kitchen pouring water for mommy and taking her medicine. Hee-hwan seemed to know what she was thinking and said. Hee-hwan closed her eyes and said, "The baby is so obedient." She reached out to Momo. Hee-hwan was like a little animal, obedient to her mother. Hee-hwan felt a surge of warmth in her heart. She wanted to hug Hee-hwan but hesitated. She was afraid that she would pass on her illness to Hee-hwan. At this moment, Chin Mo came over. He was still wearing the suit he had worn when he left in the morning, but he had taken off his jacket. Now, he was wearing a pair of iron gray trousers, a white shirt, and a light gray twill tie. He looked very noble. He held a glass of water and a medicine box in his hand. He sat on the bed and said, "You probably caught a cold last night. I took your temperature. It's 39 degrees. Take some medicine first. If it doesn't work, I'll take you to the hospital." Hee-hwan looked at him. Her throat seemed to be burning. "Are you not feeling well?" His gaze was deep. "Don't learn from others and wear evening gowns in the future. That has nothing to do with this." "Then, everyone who wears it will catch a cold?" Hee-hwan retorted. Then, she propped herself against the headboard and took the glass from him. Chin Mo stared at her. "But others are used to showing their arms and legs. Besides, they are celebrities and need to show their bodies and skin. Hee-hwan, you are the director. Is it necessary? So I have to dress like a man?" She looked at him strangely and gestured for him to give her the medicine box. He was too strange. They were already divorced, so he didn't care what she wore. Chin Mo looked at her silently. Then, he opened the box and didn't give her 2 pills. Instead, he put them by her lips. Hee-hwan looked at him. His voice was low and hoarse. Hee-hwan is watching from the side. She took the medicine reluctantly. Her soft lips touched his palm and his body throbbed. In fact, he hadn't touched a woman for a long time since that dark night. Last night, he and Hee-hwan were lying in the same bed. He had lied. He clearly had feelings and desires. But he couldn't admit it because he was too proud. Hee-hwan took the medicine and drank half a glass of water. Her body still hurt, so she lay down and closed her eyes. "I want to sleep for a while." Then, Chin Mo didn't say anything and took away the glass. After a while, Hee-hwan opened her eyes and looked at each other. "From where you are my temperature?" "From Chin Mo, I took it from you," he asked. "From Hee-yang, from daddy, eyes." "From Chin Hwan's yang. You." He his eyes and he. Shut. You can have a good rest now." Hee-hwan chuckled. Chin Mo took Hee-hwan away, saying that she wanted her mother to have a good rest. Hee-hwan didn't understand. She asked her father on the sofa outside, "Why did you lie to her when you were taking her temperature from under her armpit?" Chin Mo hugged his daughter and kissed her. This is the fun between husband and wife. Hee-hwan's eyes widened. She couldn't understand this topic. Chin Mo pulled her hair and smiled. "Baby, you did very well today. You can even call daddy when you're sick." She wanted to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, husband, addicted to pampering. On WeChat, she followed Udo literature. Talking about life and looking for confidants. Chapter 42:15. Ihuan was excited to hear that. She hesitated for a while before telling her father, actually, mommy has symptoms. Huh? Qin Mo asked absent-mindedly as he tugged at his daughter's hair. Ihuan's little face was straight as she said seriously, mommy was very strange today. She asked me a lot of questions. I thought I was a little stupid, but in order to cooperate with mommy and not hurt mommy's self-esteem, I still answered. Daddy, is mommy's brain fried to ask me these questions? Qin Mo laughed, not knowing how to answer his daughter's question. If Ihuan knew, she would vomit blood. Qin Mo accompanied the little girl for a while before checking on Ihuan. She was sleeping very soundly. Fortunately, the temperature had dropped a little, but it was still 38 degrees Celsius. It was not comfortable and soon, she was covered in sweat. Qin Mo thought about it and took a towel to wipe her down. When he was unbuttoning her shirt, he was a little hesitant. He looked at the beads of sweat on her delicate skin. It was fine and creamy. Originally, he just wanted to wipe her sweat, but now, he had other thoughts. Ihuan did not wake up. His face was a little red as he hastily wiped her down and pulled up her pajamas. If it weren't for the fact that they were divorced, he wouldn't have been so gentlemanly. He would have nibbled and kissed her. After Qin Mo was done wiping Ihuan, he carried her to the other side of the bed. He wanted to change the bed sheets, but he didn't want to wake her up. Ihuan was taken care of by the auntie, so he sat by her side to guard her. Ihuan did not wake up until 8 at night. Her back was cold, and she seemed to be sweating all over. Her body was weak and weak. She opened her eyes and looked around. It was familiar yet strange, and it was the place where she had experienced a dark night. She also saw Qin Mo and struggled to sit up. What time is it now? Qin Mo put down the magazine in his hand. It's 8. Ihuan bit her lower lip. Thank you for taking care of me. She was originally here to take care of Ihuan, but she did not expect to fall sick. Qin Mo just looked at her and said after a while, I should also thank you for coming to accompany Ihuan. Let's call it even. Don't say thank you. We grew up together. If we can't be husband and wife, we can't be enemies. She didn't say anything. Then she said she was hungry. Qin Mo got up and said, the food is ready. Go take a shower and we'll start eating. Ihuan nodded. She felt very uncomfortable and wanted to take a bath, but she was probably too weak. After soaking in the bathtub for about 10 minutes, her legs actually turned to jelly and she couldn't climb out for a long time. She could only call Qin Mo. When Qin Mo entered, he was a little surprised. Then, he looked at the person in the bathtub. His eyes were burning, and there was a hint of plundering in them. She was afraid of his gaze. After a while, she said, help me. Let me carry you. He probably knew that she couldn't move, so he directly reached out to hold her, bent over, and carried her straight to the master bedroom. Ihuan instinctively wrapped her arms around his neck. She was also a little nervous and afraid. Qin Mo didn't do anything to her. He put her on the bed and his voice and body were tense. I'll go get clothes for you. However, his gaze didn't immediately move away. Instead, he kept staring at her, and his Adam's apple kept moving. Her body wasn't particularly perfect. It was a little too thin, but he had had it many times and was very satisfied with and liked her body. He couldn't move his gaze away. Ihuan covered herself with the bed sheet and said in a small voice, go get clothes. She wanted to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, husband, addicted to pampering. On WeChat, she followed Udo literature. Talking about life and looking for bosom friends. Chapter 42:16. Qin Mo's gaze was still on her body. Although it was mostly blocked, he could still see her delicate shoulders. His eyes darkened, and after a long time, he said hoarsely, okay. After he went to the changing room, Ihuan was still hugging the bed sheets, and her body was trembling slightly. If one were to ask her what she felt just now, it would be fear and terror. In her heart, she couldn't quite get through that night. As she was thinking about it, Qin Mo came over with a set of home clothes in his hand, which she used to wear. He stood by the bed and asked in a low voice, can you still wear it? Ihuan silently took the clothes over. You go out first. Qin Mo turned around and walked out gracefully, and even helped her close the door gently. Only then did Ihuan crawl out of the quilt and force herself to put on the clothes. When her feet landed on the ground, she felt weak. She never knew that her body was so bad. When she went out to the dining room, she only saw that Qin Mo was there, but Ihuan wasn't. Ihuan sat on the dining chair and looked at Qin Mo. Where's Ihuan? Auntie coaxed her to sleep, he said faintly, and then scooped a bowl of soup for her. Have a bowl to nourish yourself first. Juan drank a mouthful of soup silently, and suddenly looked up at him. Chin Mo was also drinking soup silently. Seeing that she was looking at him, he smiled faintly. Why are you looking at me? Juan said very slowly, Chin Mo, it's better for us to keep a distance. Without Juan around, it's better for us to keep a distance. Chin Mo looked down. When she couldn't see him, his eyes were cold, but his voice was still very faint. I don't think I did anything impolite to you, or do you think that I should turn a blind eye to your illness and leave you to die, so that I can keep a distance? He had always been eloquent, and he was a strong person, so Juan didn't want to continue talking to him. She just quietly drank the bowl of soup, but she ate very little. Chin Mo didn't force her. Otherwise, people would say that he didn't keep his distance from her. The meal passed in silence. After eating, she wanted to return to her room, but Chin Mo said softly, tonight, Juan will sleep by yourself. If you sleep in the master bedroom, I will sleep in the guest room. I might come over to check your temperature at night. Don't turn off the lights, or you'll scream in the middle of the night. Juan didn't say anything and returned to the master bedroom. Being sick was always very uncomfortable. She lay on the bed, unable to fall asleep, but unable to get up, so she simply picked up the script and read it. As she read, she became more and more immersed in it. Even when Chin Mo came in, she did not notice. At a glance, Chin Mo saw that it was the script for Twin. It was written by her beautiful face. She snorted softly. Take your temperature. Juan froze for a moment and put down the script in her hands. You're going to start measuring again so soon? Chin Mo looked at her and said, the doctor told me. She didn't say anything else and silently reached out her hand. Chin Mo put the thermometer on her palm. Juan put it away and took it out after about 3 minutes. Chin Mo looked at it and said, 38 degrees. Take another pill at midnight. Juan hurriedly said, I'll take it by myself. You can put the medicine on the bedside table. Chin Mo stood there and quietly looked at her. You used to say the same thing, but you never remembered to take it. In the past, he mentioned the past again. Juan didn't say anything and leaned against the bedside table to read the script. I'll read it when you're well. Chin Mo directly went over and took the script from her hand. Now lie down and rest. Juan bit her lip. Chin Mo, can you not be so overbearing? I want to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, husband, addicted to pampering. Talking about life and looking for bosom friends, recommending the urban guru Shinshu. Chapter 42:17. If you weren't sick and obedient, I wouldn't be so overbearing. He stared at her and said in a deep voice, You're not only my ex-wife, but also Juan's mother. Ex-wife? Juan was dazed for a moment and thought bitterly. She was his ex-wife, so he was her ex-husband too. What he meant was that he did all this for Juan. Obviously, she was thinking too much, so she pulled up the bed sheets. Then wake me up at 12. Chin Mo stared at her for a few seconds and walked out without saying anything. Juan thought that she couldn't fall asleep because she was a little angry, but as she lay down, she felt sleepy and her bones hurt. She really fell asleep. At midnight, Chin Mo came on time. The bedroom was dark. He didn't wake her up immediately. Instead, he sat by the bed and reached out to feel the temperature. It hadn't gone down yet. He looked at her quietly for a while before taking the pill and helping her up. Juan, take your medicine. She woke up in a daze, but she wasn't fully awake. She opened her eyes and looked at him as if she was dreaming. After a while, she closed her eyes again. I'll take it. He put a pill into her mouth and then fed her water. Juan had been obedient, probably because she was too tired. After feeding her the medicine, there was no reason to hold her anymore, even if she was unconscious. Chin Mo laid her down and sat by the side to watch her quietly. After watching for a long time, he felt even more bitter in his heart. Then, he got up and walked to the French window in the living room. That night, he didn't sleep. He smoked and had red wine in his hand. Other than socializing, Chin Mo almost never touched alcohol. But tonight, he wanted to indulge himself. Juan was with him, but she didn't belong to him anymore. It was only when she was asleep that she wouldn't guard against him and wouldn't look at him with that kind of gaze. In her heart, he was a violent man, a rapist, and a criminal. If it weren't for the friendship between the two families, they would have been broken and broken. In fact, they weren't any better now. Their relationship was broken and full of holes. Chin Mo let out a long breath, drank the last glass of wine, and went to the master bedroom to check on Juan. Her temperature finally dropped. He was a little relieved. When he was about to get up and leave, Juan woke up. Her eyes narrowed, and then she looked around. Probably finding it safe, she said in a hoarse voice. Is it dawn? Not yet, it's only 5. Sleep a little more. His voice was even more hoarse than hers. Juan bit her lip and tilted her head to look at the dark night outside. Then, she thought of something and frowned. Chin Mo, did you smoke and drink? He smelled of cigarettes and alcohol. It wasn't bad, but it couldn't be ignored. Chin Mo was about to leave, but he paused. He looked down at her and said in a raspy voice, Why? Do you still care about me? Of course not. She pursed her lips and closed her eyes. Go rest. I'll sleep a little more. It was obvious that she didn't want to talk, and for some reason, she angered Chin Mo. The next second, Juan's hand was caught, and he said hoarsely, Don't you want to know why I smoke and drink? Juan said ruthlessly, Not really. Yeah, because we're divorced. He stared at her face, and his eyes seemed to be on fire. I want to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, husband, addicted to pampering. Talk about life and find a confidant. Recommend the urban guru Shinshu. Chapter 42:18. That was how they were. The more indifferent she was, the angrier he was. Because she didn't care about him. Chin Mo grabbed her wrist and squinted. You don't want to know even if we don't divorce, do you? You only care about what Rongyu thinks, don't you? Juan opened her eyes. Chin Mo, you've drunk too much. I'm not drunk. He held her hand and moved closer to her. In the end, his lips, which smelled of tobacco and alcohol, touched hers gently. I've always been sober, but I've never been so sober. She was a little afraid of him. Juan licked her lower lip and stared at him warily. I want to rest. You're running away. He stared at her. Am I making you afraid? Juan, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid that I'll hit you or rape you? As he spoke, he pinched her sharp chin and twisted it gently. As for Juan, the memories of that night resurfaced in front of her eyes. She clearly remembered how he had strangled her neck, how he had slapped her crazily, and how he had treated her rudely. Even as he had been rough with her, he had leaned against her neck and used an incredibly gentle tone to tell her that he loved her. He didn't love her. If he loved her, he wouldn't have done that. If he loved her, he wouldn't have betrayed her in their marriage. The familiar suffocation began again. Juan's pupils dilated, and she grabbed the bedsheet so hard that her fingers turned white. She was very afraid, but she couldn't say it out loud. She just lay under him helplessly. At this moment, Juan was very weak. However, Chin Mo didn't notice it. He moved his lips to kiss her. He wasn't rough. On the contrary, he was very gentle. However, Juan was extremely afraid. She lay motionless, feeling the warmth of his lips, his breath, and his strength. All of this made her afraid and terrified. She was about to suffocate, but she forgot how to breathe. Her whole body was stiff. Chin Mo looked down and pressed his lips against hers. Do you hate me so much? He didn't continue. He left her lips and let go of her. When Juan regained her freedom, she instinctively slapped Chin Mo. With a crack, the air froze into ice. Chin Mo's face, which had been slapped to the side, slowly turned back and looked at Juan quietly. Juan's breathing was very chaotic. He was like a small fish on the verge of death, desperately breathing. The corners of her eyes were filled with tears. He was originally furious, but when he saw those tears, he realized that she was just scared and terrified. He woke up from his drunkenness and realized what he had done to her. He lowered his eyes and said in a low voice, Sorry, I drank too much. Juan didn't look at him again. She turned her body stiffly and hugged the blanket tightly with her fingers. She spat out a hoarse word, Get lost. At this moment, it was as if they had returned to that dark night. She was afraid, and he was helpless. Chin Mo took a step back, apologized again, and walked out. He leaned against the door. His body was exhausted, but he was unwilling to leave. He heard Juan's suppressed crying. Her crying made his heart ache. The hope that had risen in his heart seemed to be shattered again. Actually, after he had done that to her and asked for a divorce, everything had been his own sweet dream. How could Juan still want him? Chin Mo had forgotten how he had been willing to let go. He loved her and couldn't let go. I want to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, husband, addicted to pampering. Talk about life and find a confidant. Recommend the urban guru Shinshu. Chapter 42:19. Things had always been a little ugly between them. And now, he was using Juan to get close to Juan. Juan might not have understood that she cared about Juan, but Su Cheng wasn't someone who could be easily dismissed. Juan was her daughter, even though she doted on Juan. However, their relationship was different. Juan had so many people doting on her, but Juan only had their parents. Su Chang came to visit Yi Huan and was surprised to find that Yi Huan was sick as well. She felt helpless and angry at the same time. Coincidentally, Qin Mo had gone to work, so Su Chang lowered her voice and asked, "Why are you with him again? Didn't Mom tell you last time to take care of him and visit him when you're free? Why are you living with him in such an ambiguous manner?" Yi Huan was still a little weak. Coupled with what happened in the morning, she looked a little dazed. She lowered her eyes and told him what had happened. Su Chang snorted coldly, "You can't trust Qinchen's words. How can you be so stupid?" She reached out and placed her finger on her daughter's forehead. Yi Huan bit her lip and said softly, "Mom, even if Yi Huan isn't sick, she must have sensed it and threw a tantrum. I can't bear to part with her." Su Chang was a little disappointed. "Look, you fell into Qin Mo's trap. He was clearly in the wrong back then. He even used underhanded means to get you pregnant and give birth to Yi Huan. He just wanted to tie you down. Look, you guys can't even get a clear divorce. In the future, how are you going to talk about the future?" Yi Huan looked troubled. "Mom, I'm not in a hurry." "I am." Su Chang rolled her eyes. "How can I not be in a hurry when she's over 30? It was Qin Mo before that. Do you know how difficult it is to find a suitable one?" Yi Huan sighed. "Let nature take its course." However, Su Chang couldn't say no. She thought about it carefully and said, "You can't miss someone you're already dating. I've already made an appointment for you. It's tomorrow at 6:00 in the afternoon. It won't take up much time for both of you to have dinner together. Aren't you going to film later? You don't have time." Yi Huan still wanted to refute, but Su Chang waved her hand. "I know what you want to say. But Huan, let me tell you, you will only be taken advantage of by Qin Mo. If he lets you go, it's all bullshit. Look, you're sleeping in his bed and living in his place. What kind of divorce is this? If this gets out, will you still be able to marry?" Yi Huan's lips moved as she whispered, "We slept separately." He can't sleep separately either. He has only endured it for a month or two now. If it were half a year or a year, would he be able to endure it? Su Chang's tone was a little strange. There is no Liu Xiaohui in the Qin family. Hearing this, even Yi Huan couldn't help but laugh. "Mom, how did you know?" Su Chang's old face turned red. "Don't ask. Of course I know. Don't be late tomorrow at 6:00. The location is Yunzhong Restaurant. You know it too." Yi Huan's lips moved, but she finally gave in. Su Chang didn't stay for long. Instead, she took Yi Huan out to play. She said that it was for her daughter's happiness and that she doted on her granddaughter a lot. Yi Huan lay in bed for a long time and didn't eat at noon. Unexpectedly, Qin Mo came back in the afternoon. At about 3:00, when he came back, the housekeeper said, "Madam doesn't want to eat at noon. I can't do anything about it." Qin Mo didn't correct her. He just took off his coat, threw it on the sofa, and sat down. "Has anyone been here? I want to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, husband, addicted to pampering. Talking about life and looking for bosom friends, recommending the urban guru Shi Xinshu." Chapter 42:20. The aunt quickly said, "Oh, it's like this. Madam's mother came over and talked for a while. Then, she took Yi Huan out. Madam didn't look very happy after that." Qin Mo's eyes darkened a little. He paused and asked, "Did Yi Huan have a fever again today?" The aunt smiled. "Sir, you took good care of her for the whole day. She's completely recovered today. She's in good spirits." Qin Mo didn't say anything more. He got up and went to the master bedroom. Yi Huan didn't sleep. She leaned on the sofa and read the script. Because it was evening, she turned on the reading lamp. It was dusk outside, and the room was dyed a little dreamy by the dim yellow light. Qin Mo's heart softened a little. He looked at her. She was wearing thick home clothes. Because she had just been sick yesterday, she looked a little fragile. She wasn't as fierce as she usually was. Qin Mo went over and took the script from her hand. "You've just recovered and you're busy reading this." This script was the fuse of their divorce. So, he always had a headache every time he saw it. Yi Huan snatched it from his hand and glanced at him. "The shooting starts next week. I'm not even familiar with the script. How do you expect me to shoot it?" Qin Mo sat down and stared at her for a while. "Haven't you read it many times? I thought you could recite it backwards." "Qin Mo, can you not be so harsh with your words?" she said a little impatiently. Qin Mo reached out and pulled her hair. "I took care of you yesterday. Today, you're turning against me?" Yi Huan turned her face away angrily and slapped his hand away. "Not only do I turn against you, but I also know how to slap people." Her words made Qin Mo lose his temper. He wanted to get up and ask her to eat. Suddenly, he thought of something. "What did Mom say to you today?" "She said that you were unhappy the whole day." Huan leaned on the sofa. You should call me Mom. Qin Mo thought about it. But you still call me Mom, right? I did that in front of Huan. Huan was speechless. He tugged at her hair. Me too. It won't be good if we get exposed in the future. After all, it's scary to get used to this kind of thing. What do you think? Huan didn't want to talk to him. She stood up and said, I want to eat. He reached out and pulled her to sit down again. She was still sitting close to him. Huan was a little angry. Qin Mo, what else do you want? What did your mother say to you? He stared into her eyes and suddenly reached out to touch her eyes. You cried, didn't you? Huan turned his head and said bitterly, it's none of your business. Qin Mo pinched her chin and used a gentle force to force her to look at him. He asked softly, she asked you to go on a blind date, right? Huan's pupils dilated slightly. After a while, he said in a hoarse voice, it's none of your business. Qin Mo was still staring at her eyes. He knew that he had guessed correctly. Her mother had asked her to go on a blind date. He let go of her and said with difficulty, don't you have Rongyu? Why do you still want to go on a blind date? Huan fell on the sofa and hugged herself. After a long time, she asked softly, Qin Mo, is it because of Rongyu? No, it's because of you. She smiled gently. Because when we got married, you found out that the person I wanted to marry wasn't you, so you always suspected me. You felt that something was wrong when I bought Rongyu's script? You also felt that something was wrong when I happened to bump into him for a cup of coffee. You always wanted to divorce because you couldn't stand it. It had nothing to do with Rongyu or anyone else. She wanted to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, husband, addicted to pampering. Talk about life and find a confidant. Recommend the urban guru Shinshu. Chapter 42-21. After Huan said that, she felt much better. Perhaps she had wanted to say it a long time ago. Everything between them was actually broken by Qin Mo. Rongyu's existence in this world was like that woman's existence. They could not let them disappear. As for Qin Mo, he wanted to control her thoughts and everything about her. If she was unwilling, he would destroy her. At least, that was their marriage. Huan crossed her arms and said in a low voice, I used to think that I was the one enduring this marriage. But last night, what you did and said told me that you were also enduring. Before this, I always thought that you loved me very much, even if there were some accidents. Qin Mo's eyes were as deep as water. You realize that I'm enduring it, so you don't have to endure it anymore, right? Huan's voice was weak. We are not good parents. Qin Mo, I can cooperate with you if you want to give Huan a complete childhood, but other things, she looked into his eyes and said softly but firmly, other things. Since you've given up, don't think about taking possession of her anymore. You said that you won't regret it. She was not a hesitant person, but she had hesitated about this marriage for a long time. She had never thought that it would be Qin Mo who asked for a divorce. Since it was a divorce, she would not hesitate anymore. They should not be intimate anymore, or she would look down on herself. After she said that, Qin Mo did not say anything else. He just smiled and said, let's eat. He got up and walked out, his back view a little stiff. Huan composed herself and went out as well. The auntie avoided her and went out. While eating, Huan said quietly, I'll go back to my apartment tomorrow. Just tell Huan that I have a job and I'll come back a few days later when I have to leave. Qin Mo clenched his fists. No need, I'll send her to my parents' place tomorrow. Huan's expression was a little awkward. After a while, she said in a low voice, Qin Mo. You're leaving tomorrow, and she'll be taken care of by the auntie here. Why don't you go to my parents' place? His tone was calm, but he was angry. Huan didn't know why he was angry. She lowered her eyes and continued eating without saying anything. The atmosphere was stiff to the extreme. Fortunately, Sucheng sent Huan back. As soon as the little fellow came back, the house became much livelier. Huan was a soft little person. Sucheng loved Huan very much, but she didn't treat Qin Mo well. Any mother wouldn't treat a man who had beaten her daughter well, and Sucheng was no exception. She left after a while and had zero interaction with Qin Mo. Qin Mo didn't like Sucheng because of what had happened before, so he only saw Sucheng off when she left. Outside the door, Sucheng said straightforwardly, Qin Mo, you must have guessed that I asked Huan to go on a blind date. I know your character, so I'm saying this here. I hope you won't destroy Huan's future happiness, and don't use Huan to tie her down. It's not that I'm dissatisfied with you. To be honest, you've done a good job in the past few years, but if you're really not suitable for each other, you can divorce. Violence is the last thing you should do. I'm a mother, so of course I'll feel sorry for her, just like how Huan feels sorry for Huan. Please understand a mother's heart and don't use Ihuan to block everything, she said so, and Chin Mo didn't even have a word to say. I want to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, husband, addicted to pampering. Talk about life, find a bosom friend, recommend the urban guru Shinshu. Chapter 42-22. He had no position in front of Su Cheng. What he had done was done. It would be a dark history for the rest of his life. Chin Mo paused for a moment and said softly, "Mom, I'll remember that." Su Cheng had wanted him not to call her mom, but she had watched Chin Mo grow up. She felt that it would be too heartless to say it, so she did not say it out loud. "Don't forget what you said." She was about to leave when Chin Mo stopped her. "Mom." Su Cheng paused. Chin Mo said in a low voice, "I really like Ihuan. I've never liked anyone else but her." Su Cheng's heart softened. She thought for a moment and said, "Ihuan told me that she liked you. Chin Mo, maybe it's because your personalities don't match. Both of you are very strong-willed, so you missed each other. It's good for you to be apart. Besides," she lowered her voice, "you should have noticed that Ihuan is afraid of you. Your Uncle Kaim asked you if you'd regret it, and he told you that if you did, we wouldn't agree to it. It's only been a few days, and now that you're talking to me like this, I feel that you're treating marriage and relationships as child's play. Ihuan is a little willful, but she gave birth to your children all these years. Even though she's always been outside, she wouldn't do anything to hurt Ihuan. She cooperated with everything you did, even with your flowers and plants outside. Chin Mo, don't you say that cheating is only considered cheating when there's evidence? A man who makes a woman feel insecure isn't a good husband or a good man." Su Cheng gave him a deep look after saying that. "Think about it yourself." She left. Chin Mo did not go back immediately. Instead, he smoked a few cigarettes. As he puffed out the smoke, he asked himself if he regretted it. He couldn't say for sure. If he said that he didn't regret it, it seemed a little. If he said that he regretted it, he had no intention of remarrying Ihuan. Maybe he really wasn't a good husband. When he returned, the auntie had just finished tidying up. "Sir, I'll go back first." Chin Mo nodded. The auntie opened the door and went out. Chin Mo watched the door close before he walked inside. Ihuan and Ihuan were not in the living room. When he walked to the corridor, he heard the sound of running water. It was probably coming from the bathroom, and it was the children's suite. Chin Mo walked in without hesitation. When he went in, he saw Ihuan taking a bath. In the little pink bathtub, the little fellow was lying happily. Ihuan was carefully and gently taking care of her. She took a shower ball and squeezed some strawberry-flavored shower gel into it. She gently rubbed the shower gel on Ihuan's little arms, calves, and belly. There were bubbles everywhere. Little Ihuan blew on the bubbles happily, and her little face was filled with satisfaction. For some reason, this scene hit Chin Mo's heart. He had a feeling that Ihuan was making it up to Ihuan for the days when she was not around. He felt a little upset. He slowly walked over, squatted down beside Ihuan, and touched the little fellow's little feet with his hand. Ihuan was ticklish. She giggled. "Daddy is bad." Chin Mo smiled. "What about Mommy?" "Hello, Mommy." Ihuan even leaned over to kiss Ihuan. She was quite biased. Chin Mo smiled and did not say anything. He just tilted his head to look at Ihuan. Ihuan was still helping little Ihuan bathe. Although her movements were still a little rusty, she tried her best to do it. She wanted to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, husband, addicted to pampering. On WeChat, she followed Udu literature, talking about life and looking for bosom friends. Chapter 42-23. Chin Mo suddenly said, "In fact, you can also be a good mother." Ihuan glanced at him and didn't say anything. Little Ihuan immediately said, "I want to be a good father." Her voice was crisp. After saying that, her eyes fell on Chin Mo eagerly, for fear that he would abandon her. Chin Mo and Ihuan looked at each other and found that Ihuan's emotions were still very sensitive. The little fellow noticed Chin Mo's careless words, so they were a little worried. Ihuan pinched little Ihuan's nose, carried her up with a bath towel, and went back to the bedroom to help the little girl dry her hair, change her clothes, and make her smell good. Finally, she put her in Chin Mo's arms and said, "She's yours tonight." Ihuan hugged her father's neck and looked at her mother greedily. "I want to be a good mother." Chin Mo patted her little butt and asked, "Who taught you that?" "Grandpa taught me." Little Ihuan immediately betrayed Chin Anlin, completely. Chin Mo and Ihuan were a little uncomfortable. They looked at each other and Ihuan said, "I'm going to take a bath." Chin Mo took the little fellow back to the master bedroom with one hand. Ihwan played for a day, but she was still very energetic and kept talking to Chin Mo. Chin Mo turned sideways and coaxed her lazily. He even took a fairy tale book to read to the little girl. Ihwan came over and saw that Ihwan was very sleepy, but she was still supporting her little head with her hands and trying hard to support herself. She couldn't help but smile and whispered, "I'll coax her. You go to the guest room to rest." Chin Mo glanced at her and didn't object. Instead, when he got up, he inadvertently pinched Ihwan's calf. Ihwan woke up at once and stretched out her fat little arms to hook her father's neck. "Dad." Her eyelids closed again, but she refused to let go. Chin Mo smiled lightly. "You're so clingy." Ihwan thought for a moment. "I'll sleep in the guest room." Chin Mo stopped her. "I haven't taken a bath yet. You coax her to sleep and I'll take a bath." Ihwan had no way to refuse. She could only lie down and take Ihwan into her arms. Ihwan smelled the scent on her body and moved closer, wanting to eat there. Ihwan felt a little uncomfortable, so she pulled up the quilt and let her do as she pleased. Chin Mo reached out and rubbed Ihwan's little head. "You're so big now." Ihwan actually became a little more clear-headed. She said in a half-asleep and half-awake manner, "Daddy is also very old, and he still wants to eat. I want to eat too." For a moment, the atmosphere between the two adults was very subtle. Both of them were divorced, but a child's words actually evoked memories of those hot nights in the past. Not only Chin Mo, but Ihwan's body also felt a little hot. You go to sleep in." She put her back, she, Mo, and Xiao, at Huan, tea, after, tea. Chin Mo didn't say anything and got up to take a bath. He didn't sleep on the same bed as her, but Ihwan's words had aroused his desire. How could he let it go now? He tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. He opened his eyes and thought of all the things he had done with Ihwan. When he closed his eyes, he thought of the night they got married. No matter how he thought about it, it was all pain. It was either mental torture or physical pain. But now, she was afraid when he touched her. Their relationship was hidden under the calmness. Chin Mo tossed and turned. At 2:00, he went to the living room, thinking that a glass of red wine might help him sleep. He went out and turned on the lights. He didn't expect Ihwan to get up too. She was drinking water. She was wearing silk pajamas, which she must have changed. She wouldn't wear such a style usually because it was too feminine. He didn't know why she was wearing it now. The lights were on. When Ihwan turned her head, she also noticed the abnormal rise and fall of Chin Mo's bathrobe. Her face heated up. "I'm going to sleep." She put down the glass and walked past him. A strong arm grabbed her and said in a hoarse voice, "Why did you change? I haven't seen you wear this before." The white strapless pajamas clung to her body, making her look beautiful and sexy. At night, Ihwan was very different. She was like a demon that stole his breath. Chin Mo felt that his body was hurting even more. It was an indescribable feeling. He wanted to talk about new wife number 1, hubby, addicted to pampering, with more like-minded people. He followed Udu literature on WeChat. Talk about life and find a confidant. Chapter 42-24. Chin Mo reached out and grabbed her. With a gentle pull, Ihwan sat on his lap. Suddenly, her body stiffened. She put her hands on his shoulders and wanted to stand up, but Chin Mo didn't let her. His voice was hoarse and low. "Sit with me for a while." He took a glass of red wine and handed it to her. "Have a drink. Just treat it as accompanying me." He didn't make things difficult for her. He let go of her, sat on the other side, and poured himself a glass of wine. Ihwan actually had something to say to him. She didn't refuse and sat on the other side of the sofa. She put her feet on the sofa and took a sip of red wine. Then she said in a low voice, "It's not possible for us to live together for a long time. I want to bring Ihwan to live with me sometimes." Chin Mo looked at her quietly. Ihwan continued, "Chin Mo, you know what I'm talking about." Chin Mo looked at her with a mysterious expression. "You want Ihwan to call someone else daddy? If you really want to go on a blind date." Ihwan didn't deny it anymore. She said in a low voice, "I won't get married." Then she said, "You know about my mom? Chin Mo, please understand other people's difficulties." As she spoke, she stopped and tilted her head back to drink half a glass of red wine. After drinking it, her cheeks were a little red and her eyes were a little mellow. Ihwan had never been so beautiful in front of him. She always kept a distance. At this moment, it was probably because she was drunk or because she was wearing sexy pajamas. If he didn't know her well, he would think that his ex-wife was seducing him. But that wasn't the case. She probably just couldn't find pajamas, so she drew this one. She had never liked to have a relationship with him, not to mention that she hated him now. Qin Mo looked at her silently and said softly, He-Huan, is it hard to love me? He-Huan was stunned and said instinctively, Qin Mo, you drank too much. She wanted to leave again, but his voice was low and strong. Don't go. When she spoke again, she seemed a little fragile. Talk to me for a while. He-Huan knew that she couldn't leave if he didn't let her, so she didn't leave. Thus, he went over and poured himself a glass of wine, sipping it slowly. Qin Mo just looked at her and didn't say anything. He-Huan looked down. What do you think about what I told you? He-Huan? His body relaxed on the sofa. Under the dim light, even though he was only wearing a bathrobe, he still looked attractive. Qin Mo was in his 30s, which was the most mature and charming period of a man's life. He looked at He-Huan and smiled faintly. If we don't get married, there's no need to let He-Huan know that we're divorced, right? His words were actually a little cunning, and He-Huan didn't want to talk to him. She was still taking small sips of the red wine and did not look at him. After drinking another cup, she said, I'm going to bed. You should sleep early too. He-Huan, he called her name and then reached out to pull her onto his lap. This time, he didn't let her go. He bit her neck directly. He-Huan was shocked, and her voice was hoarse. Qin Mo. Qin Mo's voice was particularly hoarse. I really want to bite you to death. Of course, he couldn't really bite her to death. He just bit her neck hard, leaving 2 suspicious bite marks at the junction of her chin and neck. I made you go on a blind date with someone else. I made you dress like this to seduce me. I made you want to leave me. I made you dislike me. I wanted to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, husband, addicted to pampering. Talking about life and looking for confidants. Chapter 42-25. Qin Mo's heart was filled with all sorts of indignation, and all of it was vented in this bite. He-Huan's body was stiff. He didn't let go of her immediately. He was still holding her waist and his voice was hoarse. Are you afraid of me? He-Huan was indeed afraid of him. She was only in her pajamas, and her chin was forced to rest on his shoulder. She could feel Qin Mo's urgency. However, he didn't do much. He just held her waist and closed his eyes to calm himself down. His face was tense because of Yu-Wang, as if it had been carved by a knife. She didn't dare to move for fear of touching him. After a long time, Qin Mo finally let go of her. His tense face relaxed, and the icy flames in his eyes disappeared. He said hoarsely, go to sleep. He-Huan left as if she was escaping. She didn't expect him to let her go, but when she reached the bathroom in the bedroom, she found 2 deep hickeys on her neck. No, they were bite marks. She touched it lightly, and it still hurt a little. He-Huan was furious. She held the sink and cursed, this pervert. He definitely did it on purpose. He-Huan immediately thought of the blind date tomorrow. It would definitely be a fake, but she would be scolded by her mother. Moreover, they would definitely suspect whether she and Qin Mo had slept together. With this thing here, anyone who saw it would think that they had done it. He-Huan was very angry, but she was really tired in the middle of the night. She simply put on some medicine and went to sleep. The next morning, she ran to the bathroom to check her neck. She was furious again. The hickeys were still there, and they didn't fade at all. She took a powder puff and tried to wipe it a few times, but she couldn't stop it. She heard a soft laugh. She turned her head and saw that it was Qin Mo. He was dressed neatly in a classic black and white suit and looked very handsome. He-Huan glared at him. Qin Mo didn't care. He put his hands in front of him and said elegantly, are you going on a blind date today? He-Huan snorted. It's none of your business. It's none of my business, but I can take care of He-Huan for you, lest she spoils your plans. He smiled faintly, but there was no smile in his eyes. In He-Huan's eyes, it was a fake smile. He-Huan stared at him. Qin Mo smiled again. What's wrong? Are you unhappy that I'm magnanimous? He-Huan took a toothbrush and squeezed some toothpaste out of it. When you're so generous, I feel like you're up to something. Is that so? You don't understand me. He shrugged and turned to leave. After a while, he paused as if he remembered something and said, oh right, the pajamas you wore last night were very nice. He-Huan furiously brushed his teeth and glared at him. Qin Mo chuckled and left. He then spoke again, you're doing it at night, right? I have an appointment with someone. He-Huan will be with my parents. He-Huan ignored him and furiously brushed her teeth. She dealt with some things during the day. Because the filming was about to start, there were a lot of things to deal with. She had been busy with her divorce and taking care of He-Huan recently. Instead, Kong Qiao helped her with a lot of things, which she was very grateful for. She was busy in the studio until 4 in the afternoon. When she was about to leave after stretching her neck, her assistant came in and said that a Mr. Rong was looking for her. He-Huan hesitated for a moment. Let him in. It was Rongyu. When Rongyu walked in, Hee-hwan had already changed her expression into one of high spirits. She greeted him lightly. "You're here." Chapter 42-26. She took out a notebook. "This is the second payment. There shouldn't be any problems with the script modification, right?" Rongyu stared at her for a while and handed her a notebook. Hee-hwan flipped through it and looked up. "It's pretty good." She found a check for 1 million yuan. Rongyu's script cost 4 million yuan. 2 million for the early stage, 1 million for the revised script, and another million for the middle of filming. Rongyu didn't say anything. Hee-hwan handed him the check and he took it quietly. "Thank you. It's the normal fee." Hee-hwan smiled. "I heard that many companies are begging for your script. The price has already reached 10 million yuan. Congratulations." Rongyu didn't care much about fame and fortune, but he wasn't completely ignorant. He smiled and said, "Hee-hwan, because you picked my script, I was able to rise to the top. So, thank you." Hee-hwan let out a long sigh and hesitated for a while. "Rongyu, your talent can be bought with money, but I always hope that you will consider when choosing a partner. It will be beneficial for your future development. Don't become a tool for others to make money. There's no way out in this industry without a good reputation." Rongyu smiled. "I know." Hee-hwan gestured for him to drink some tea. They chatted casually for a while and then looked at the time. Rongyu looked at her. "Are you in a hurry?" Hee-hwan smiled. "I have some personal matters to deal with." Rongyu looked down and whispered. "I heard that you and Chin Mo got divorced. Is that true?" Hee-hwan was startled. After a long time, she sighed softly. "Rongyu, this has nothing to do with you, really." He looked up at her, and there was something like a spark in his eyes. He hesitated for a while and then said, "Do I still have a chance?" He said it so bluntly that Hee-hwan couldn't avoid it. She thought for a while and said softly, "Rongyu, we can only be old friends. We might be good friends, but," she seemed to chuckle softly. "Do you know, you and Chin Mo look a little alike? I married him in the past because he looked like you, but now, it's impossible between us because you look a little like him." Rongyu listened carefully to her words, and his expression turned ugly. What she said could not be clearer. In the past, Chin Mo was his shadow, and now he was Chin Mo's shadow. She fell in love with Chin Mo. Why? He asked her persistently, "Why did you like her and then divorce her?" Hee-hwan smiled. "We used to like each other, but we didn't get together." As for why, she couldn't explain it. It seemed like it was because of the violence that night, but she knew it wasn't. She and Chin Mo had been torturing each other for a long time. They were like two parallel lines that had walked further and further away from each other. They did not want to feel any more pain and wanted to protect themselves. That was all. Instinctively no longer love, instinctively selfish, that was it. After Hee-hwan finished speaking, she smiled faintly. However, Rongyu could see a hint of regret in her eyes. He understood that she might have fallen in love with Chin Mo. Rongyu did not expose her. He stood up and said in a low voice, "I'll leave first. I still have a dinner tonight." He wanted to say something, but he swallowed his words and did not say anything. When they parted, both of them were silent. There was something that they couldn't say. Chapter 42-27. Hee-hwan sent him off. When she saw Rongyu's back, she gently leaned against a pillar. She really didn't love Rongyu anymore. Perhaps it had been too long and they had never been together. All the memories she liked were filled and replaced by someone named Chin Mo. But in the end, she didn't end up with Chin Mo either. Hee-hwan looked at it quietly. After a long time, she seemed to have thought of something and immediately got up to tidy up the documents on the table. She looked at the script and called her assistant over. "Xiaowen, make a few copies of this and distribute them. There are some changes." The assistant nodded. Hee-hwan went to the washroom again and applied a layer of powder on her neck, hoping that no one would notice. She wasn't afraid of anyone but Su Cheng. Su Cheng was small and fierce. At home, both Kaim and Hee-hwan were afraid of her. Hee-hwan often lamented that the little princess at home wasn't her but her mother, Su Cheng. But it wasn't a bad thing for parents to love each other. Hee-hwan looked at it again and felt that it was about time. She took her handbag and went out. She had just walked out when Xiaowen came back. She looked at Hee-hwan and then her gaze landed on her neck. "Director He, you have a dinner appointment?" Hee-hwan rarely put on makeup. But today, she put on light makeup and looked like it was a private dinner appointment. Hee-hwan nodded. When she passed by her assistant, she suddenly said, "Oh, Director He, do you want to fix your neck? It's a little obvious. How about a scarf?" Hee-hwan paused for a moment before turning her head. "Is it very obvious?" She reached out to touch it. She had applied a few layers of powder. The assistant said in a trembling voice, "It looks like it was sucked by a vampire." Hee-hwan stared at her for a long time before asking, "Do you have a scarf?" The assistant shook her head. "No. Actually, it was a little strange to wear a scarf on such a hot day. Also, the bite was too high. It must have been done on purpose." The assistant had heard that her boss had accidentally divorced. So, this hickey was from a new boyfriend? It doesn't seem like it. It's only been a few days. The assistant's eyes suddenly widened. She seemed to have thought of something. After a long time, she said in a trembling voice, "It's President Chin, isn't it?" Hee-hwan glared at her. "That's too crude of a word." "What?" The assistant scratched her head. "Director He, you usually talk like this too." Hee-hwan hit her with her handbag and then left. In the elevator, she looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. She gritted her teeth and hurried to buy a silk scarf before the dinner. She looked at the time again. It was almost the appointed time. Wu Do rushed to the restaurant that Su Chang had arranged to meet at. The man was already there, probably accompanied by his mother. Su Chang was also chatting with him. When she saw Su Chang coming, she immediately waved her hand and said, "Hee-hwan is here." Hee-hwan walked over and sat across from them. She said lightly, "Sorry for being late." When Su Chang saw how cold she was, she immediately smiled. Young people nowadays work fast. Fortunately, the man's mother was also well-mannered. She said pleasantly, "Su Chang, I heard that your Hee-hwan is a director and has directed several famous films. Our Jiaqing is also a loyal fan of hers. This kind of relationship is very stable." She looked like she liked her very much. Mainly, the man was from a scholarly family and did not like girls who were too delicate. Hee-hwan's coldness won her favor. Chapter 42-28. Su Chang was very satisfied with the man, especially since he was well-mannered and good-looking. He was a good match for Hee-hwan, but this was their first marriage. She didn't know if there would be any complications. Thinking of this, Su Chang thought of Chin Mo. Chin Mo used to be half her son, so their relationship was naturally different. She sighed softly. They were not meant to be. Now that others didn't do anything, she had to do something as a mother. She had to fight for her daughter even if she had to sacrifice her decades of friendship with Liangqiu. Otherwise, with Chin Mo's domineering character, he would definitely use Hee-hwan to take advantage of Hee-hwan. Their Hee-hwan was good-looking and capable, so why should she be manipulated by Chin Mo? Hee-hwan didn't even care about Chin Mo's trivial matters in the past, but Chin Mo. Su Chang stopped. She didn't want to think about it. Hee-hwan nodded at the man, then picked up her cup and slowly drank her tea. She was a little absent-minded and didn't even hear the order clearly. Fortunately, their mothers were chatting warmly, and the man called Zhang Jiaqing was also very considerate, speaking softly. It was a very harmonious scene of a blind date. However, it was soon disrupted by someone. Chin Mo appeared. To Hee-hwan's surprise, the person who appeared with Chin Mo wasn't a B-list actress or a C-list model, but Rong Yu, whom she had just met. The appearance of two outstanding men naturally attracted a lot of attention, including Hee-hwan's table, even though she didn't want to see it. Su Chang's expression was a little tense. She didn't want to see Chin Mo at this time. However, there were some things that she couldn't do even if she didn't want to. Chin Mo and Rong Yu looked at each other and said in a very elegant manner, "Pick a seat first. I'll be there in a moment." The scene of two handsome men was very pleasing to the eye. Not to mention that Chin Mo's expression and voice were very gentle at this time. There was a kind of rotten feeling, a kind of soft feeling. Rong Yu felt a little helpless. He and Chin Mo were here to discuss a collaboration. Only now did he realize that this small collaboration required President Chin's personal involvement. It was because Rong Yu had other uses. He smiled bitterly and looked at Hee-hwan and the man opposite her. The situation couldn't be clearer. He nodded at Hee-hwan. "Director He." There was a sense of distance between them again. Hee-hwan smiled faintly. On the other hand, Su Chang's face darkened. Chin Mo was too much. Not only was it not enough for him to come, but he also dragged Rong Ning along. Did he think it wasn't lively enough? However, the blind date was here, and she was very satisfied and optimistic about him, so she could only suppress her anger. She didn't look good, but Chin Mo had a pleasant smile on his face and politely greeted her, "Mom." Su Chang's face was beyond recognition. Even Hee-hwan couldn't bear it and choked on her tea. The woman was a little surprised. "Su Chang, I thought you didn't have a son." However, she immediately realized something and didn't say anything. The atmosphere was quite subtle. Hee-hwan and Su Chang didn't dare to lose their temper, and the other party also endured it. On the other hand, Chin Mo didn't feel anything about the commotion he caused. Instead, he smiled and said, "Mom, Hee-hwan, you guys eat slowly. I'll pay the bill." "It's okay." Hee-hwan's voice was very soft. Then, she smiled at Zhang Jiaqing. "It's not suitable for you to pay for this meal." This was considered a counterattack. Hee-hwan didn't show it on the surface, but she was furious inside. Chapter 42-29. From the bite mark last night to the appearance of Rongyu, it was all a surprise that he had meticulously prepared for her. How childish and ridiculous. Even though Hee-hwan was not prepared to do anything to Fang Jiaqing, she was still angry. She was considerate as she picked out the menu with Fang Jiaqing and spoke in a gentle voice. This was something that Qin Mo had never experienced before. Moreover, she treated Qin Mo like heir. President Qin treated Su Chang as his mother. The atmosphere became more subtle. Qin Mo's gaze landed on Su Chang's neck and he chuckled. "The weather seems to be very hot today. Aren't you hot, Hee-hwan?" Hee-hwan ignored him. It has nothing to do with President Qin. Although her tone was not good, the way she asked and answered Qin Mo's question and answer inevitably made people think that they were flirting. Qin Mo knew when to stop. He politely greeted everyone before going to look for Rongyu. Su Chang looked at the first half of the table and gritted her teeth in anger. Qin Mo was really going all out. He even brought Rongyu, whom she hated the most, over. She really wanted to give this little jerk a good smack on the head. Although she was angry, she still wanted to save her face. However, Su Chang could not eat peacefully during the meal. She found an opportunity to drag Hee-hwan to the washroom for a private talk. She knew in her heart that this matter would definitely fall through. On the other side, Qin Mo went to look for Rongyu. Rongyu chose a secluded seat and sat down. He drank his tea while waiting for Qin Mo. Qin Mo sat down and Rongyu poured a cup of tea for him. As he poured, he slowly said, "It seems that CEO Qin has an ulterior motive for inviting me over today. You have another purpose." Qin Mo sat comfortably and casually picked a few dishes to dismiss the waiter. He then lazily said to Rongyu, "Tell me, how useful are you? Don't tell me that President Qin thinks that he's not important enough, so he's dragging me along with him." Rongyu took small sips of his tea. The tea moistened his light-colored lips, making him look very attractive and somewhat tempting. No matter how much Qin Mo despised Rongyu, he had to admit that Rongyu's appearance was comparable to his. In the eyes of a director like Hee-hwan, Rongyu was more artistic, while he reeked of money. The more he thought about it, the more upset he felt. He gulped down a glass of apéritif. Rongyu looked at him quietly. "Did President Qin not put in enough effort last night?" Qin Mo stared at Rongyu with an aggressive gaze. Rongyu was still indifferent. "As far as I know, it was President Qin who wanted a divorce. Are you regretting it now?" Qin Mo was still drinking lightly. He said indifferently, "It has nothing to do with you." Rongyu didn't say anything else. Instead, they talked about cooperation. Qin Mo offered him a very high price for the new script. 10 million yuan was considered a top price. This was because Unparalleled was a prequel to Twin, and Twin was produced by Hee-hwan. Naturally, the price of the subsequent dramas would rise. Rongyu looked down. "President Qin, I only have one condition. Let Bai Jingxian play the male lead." Qin Mo frowned. "He's an artist from Stars Entertainment. Do you think I'll spend a lot of money to promote him?" Rongyu smiled indifferently. 10 million yuan is far from a huge sum for President Qin. Also, isn't it good to use Bai Jingxian to promote the female artists under your company? Bai is already a very mature artist. His acting skills are much more mature than other fresh meat. Qin Mo narrowed his eyes. "You're not asking for Hee-hwan to direct, are you? I might not be able to do that. Also, you have to convince Bai Jingxian." He wanted to chat about new wife number 1, hubby, addicted to pampering, with more like-minded people. He followed Yudu literature on WeChat, talking about life and looking for a bosom friend. Chapter 42-30. Rongyu agreed with Rongyu and signed the papers. They did not bring any lawyers or secretaries with them. Qin Mo kept the documents and looked at Rongyu. "You don't want to be popular? With your appearance and melancholy temperament, you'll be popular and won't lose to Kong Qiao." Rongyu smiled faintly. "I don't like to be in front of the stage. I just want to live a peaceful life." After he said that, Qin Mo didn't say anything else. He turned his face to the side, thinking that perhaps this was the kind of Rongyu that Hee-hwan liked. Hee-hwan liked him. Qin Mo gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. He wasn't in the mood to eat and even ate a few mouthfuls. He didn't know if he was angry, but he didn't leave and just sat there. After sitting for a long time, they finally dispersed. When they left, they realized that He Huan's table was already gone and the waiters were cleaning it up. Qin Mo's face was dark. He paused for a moment and left. He walked out and Rongyu followed him to say goodbye. Their relationship was really delicate now. Qin Mo didn't get into the car immediately. He turned to look at Rongyu. "Come to my company, I can give you the best conditions." Rongyu smiled. "President Qin, if it's because of my talent, we can talk about working together. If it's because of He Huan, it's fine. President Qin doesn't deserve to be called a sucker." Qin Mo glanced at him and turned to get into the car. He returned to the condominium. In the car, he made a call to his parents to ask about He Huan's situation. Yi Liangqiu gave him a good beating. It was probably Su Chang who had caused trouble for them. Yi Liangqiu reprimanded Yi Huan for his evil deeds. "Qin Mo, do you think divorce is a joke? You were the one who insisted on it and Yi Huan didn't say a word. It's only been a few days and you're already regretting it?" Yi Liangqiu was furious. Qin Mo drove with a slender hand on the steering wheel. His face was dark. "Mom, you know that He Huan went on a blind date a few days after the divorce." Yi Liangqiu was silent for a long time. His voice became softer and softer. "What can I say about you? He Huan probably didn't mean that. She just didn't want Su Cheng to be too upset. Qin Mo, what you did this time was too ungentlemanly and immoral. Moreover, a divorce is a divorce. It's not something you can interfere with He Huan's blind date." It wasn't that Yi Liangqiu didn't want them to be well off, but he felt that his son's methods were too despicable. Today, he heard that even his love rival had been dragged over. Oh, now they were fighting on the same side, and then there would be a civil war later on? She remembered that Qin Mo used to be very decisive, but all his irrational and childish behavior had been used on He Huan. Yi Liangqiu was speechless. After talking for a long time, she still couldn't do anything to him. She could only give up. Qin Mo hung up and wanted to call He Huan, but his pride stopped him from doing so. Instead, he drove back. He drove the car back to the apartment and turned off the engine before opening the door. A hand was on the door of his car. Qin Mo sensed something and lowered the window to take a look. It was He Huan. The silk scarf around He Huan's neck was gone. Su Cheng had taken it off. Then, she called Qin Mo's parents and told them about it. He Huan was also scolded badly. No matter how she explained, it was useless. Su Cheng forbade her to live with Qin Mo anymore and kept scolding him for being too evil. At that moment, He Huan was wearing a white baseball uniform, as if she had been waiting for him for a long time. Qin Mo was not in a hurry to get out of the car. He even leaned back in the seat and looked at her. "Have you been home?" He Huan knew that he was trying to take advantage of her again. She snorted coldly. "Qin Mo, you're too despicable." She waved her hand. It was a baseball bat. Then, she smashed Qin Mo's car, which was worth more than 20 million yuan. Although it was not to the extent of being smashed into pieces, the headlights and body of the car were all damaged to varying degrees. Qin Mo frowned and let her smash his car. He even turned on the music. He Huan was even angrier. She threw the baseball bat away and glared at him. "President Qin, please don't follow me anymore. Don't do such childish things again." He looked at her quietly in the dark night. He had drunk a little. He was definitely not drunk, but his gaze was a little flirtatious. "I'll make it up tomorrow." She wanted to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, hubby, addicted to pampering. She followed Yudu literature on WeChat, talking about life and looking for bosom friends. Chapter 42-31. Are you angry? He chuckled. Did I ruin your plans, or is it because another man saw the bite mark on your neck and got angry? Oh, Rong, you should have seen it too. Did he ask you to get back together with him today? He Huan gritted her teeth and smashed the front of his car again. With a loud bang, there was a big pit, and the car shook a few times. However, Qin Mo was still sitting in the car, not moving at all. It was just that there was an unknown look in his black eyes. He Huan smashed his car, threw the baseball bat away, and wanted to run away. She sensed danger. However, Qin Mo didn't let her. He reached out and grabbed her hand through the broken window. He didn't care if the broken glass pierced his arm. He was only wearing a shirt, and his elbow was rolled up. The sharp glass pierced his arm, and blood kept dripping. It was a frightening sight. He Huan's hand moved, and she glared at him. Qin Mo. He was still holding her hand, and his voice was hoarse. Come here. He Huan refused to go over and stood there stubbornly. She had just smashed his car, and she wasn't going to go over. She struggled to free herself. Unexpectedly, he was only holding onto her hand, but he could still be swayed by her. This way, his arm was immediately cut by the glass, and blood instantly dyed He Huan's eyes red. She bit her lip and said in a hoarse voice, Chin Mo, let go of me. Your hand is bleeding. Even if it's bleeding, it's because of you. He grabbed her with one hand and unbuckled the seat belt with the other. Then, he opened the car door and let go of her hand for a moment. However, when she wanted to run away, he was able to quickly grab her hand again. Chin Mo grabbed her hand and said in a hoarse voice, Huan, don't go. He had already gotten out of the car, and he stared at her in the dark. You want to run away after doing something bad? Huan bit her lip. What do you want? Chin Mo looked at his car and whispered, I don't want you to pay for the car that's more than 10 million yuan, but help me bandage it. As he spoke, he carried her to the elevator. Huan was still struggling, but he didn't dare to use too much strength. It was just a symbolic struggle. She softened, but Chin Mo pushed his luck and pulled her into his arms. Huan exclaimed, and he lowered his head to kiss her lips. He first touched her lips lightly, then looked at her widened eyes, and couldn't help but deepen the kiss. On the other hand, Huan didn't resist much, but his breathing quickened. She opened her eyes and looked at the intoxicated expression on Chin Mo's face. She couldn't help but pinch down hard on his shoulder. Chin Mo groaned as more blood flowed from his arm, but he didn't care. Instead, he pushed her against the wall of the elevator and kissed her fiercely. This time, Huan was unwilling to be kissed by him again. She bit her lip and said in a low voice, don't touch me. She huddled against the wall of the elevator, her body trembling slightly. Chin Mo stared at her for a long time before he said in a hoarse voice, I won't touch you anymore. She still trembled for a long time before she opened her eyes. In front of her was Chin Mo and his bleeding arm. Huan's lips moved, and after a long time, she said, I'll take you to the hospital. It's okay. Just help me bandage it. His voice was very low. Huan didn't say anything else. She just walked out of the elevator and arrived at the place where she used to live. Chapter 42-32. Chin Mo opened the door. It was dark inside, but when he turned on the lights, the house was brightly lit. He turned his head, wanting to speak to her. However, he caught sight of the tears in her eyes. Chin Mo froze for a moment, his voice extremely hoarse. You're crying? Huan shook her head. No. She lowered her gaze and asked him softly, where's the first aid kit? However, he did not let her off. He pinched her little chin and said in an even deeper voice, you were so fierce when you smashed my car. Now, you're bleeding. Or is it because I kissed you that you're so scared? I'm not. Huan wanted to turn her face away, but he did not allow her to. He held her chin and looked at her carefully. You're still denying it? Your eyes are red, just like a little rabbit's. Initially, Huan was feeling a little guilty because of his arm injury. However, her anger flared up again. She glared at him and said through gritted teeth, I did smash your car, Chin Mo. But don't try to flirt with me. You're the one who divorced us. What you're doing now is really childish. If you think that the divorce was wrong, fine, I don't mind if we remarry. For Huan's sake, I don't mind. Chin Mo's expression was a little terrible. He stared at her eyes and said in a low voice, don't mind? Fine, let's just say that it doesn't matter. Let's remarry. Chin Mo, are you willing? Huan stared into his eyes. This time around, Chin Mo did not say anything. Huan smiled knowingly. You don't know if it's true or not. You haven't thought it through, right? You might just be feeling a little uncomfortable. Chin Mo, let go. A man should let go to the end. Her voice was a little choked. I'll go get the first aid kit. Even though she felt that his wound was a little big and should really be treated by a professional doctor, he should be able to handle it himself if he were to have a fever later on. Chin Mo looked at her back view and sat down on the sofa slowly. He took out a cigarette with one hand and lit it up. His gaze, however, was still locked onto her. Huan found the medicine box and placed it on the coffee table. She looked at him smoking and reached out to remove the cigarette butt. However, he grabbed her hand again and said in a low voice, aren't we divorced? What does my smoking have to do with you? Huan was speechless. Then you can slap him to death. She didn't want to talk to him. She put her hand down and sat down beside him to bandage his wound. Chin Mo turned his head and looked at her. Aren't you afraid that I'll touch you again? Unless you want to bleed to death. Huan glared at him. Chin Mo's eyes darkened. I don't need to use my arms to touch you. Huan glared at him. Take off your shirt. Chin Mo was still very cooperative. He took off his shirt and looked at her. Is there anything else that needs to be taken off? Huan ignored him and started to clean his wound. She used a pair of tongs to pick up some cotton and dipped it in iodine to rub around the wound. It stimulated the wound and caused waves of pain. Chin Mo smoked and didn't cry out in pain. He just stared at He-Huan with a pair of deep eyes. You asked for it. He-Huan didn't pity him. She continued to clean his wound. After the wound was cleaned, He-Huan applied ointment and bandaged it with gauze and bandages. There were a lot of wounds on his arm. After He-Huan bandaged them, she said again, you should go to the hospital tomorrow to apply ointment. This wound is quite big, and it might get inflamed. No need. Qin Mo got up lazily and put on a shirt with one hand. I've applied medicine. Miss He, you can leave now. Chapter 42-33. He-Huan put down the things in her hands and left as soon as she said she would. The moment she got up, he grabbed her and pulled her back, causing her to fall onto the sofa. Qin Mo, don't you think you're funny? He stared at her, looking a little fragile. I just don't want you to go on a blind date. With that said, he hugged her. He didn't do anything else, just hugging her and resting his chin on her shoulder. At the start, He-Huan was still very stiff and didn't speak for a long time. Later on, when he stopped doing anything, her body slowly softened and she said hoarsely, Qin Mo, let go of me. I'm leaving. He didn't let go, neither did he say anything. He just started biting her shoulder gently, biting her flesh as though it was delicious. It was a little torturous like that. If he were to kiss her directly or something, she could just push him away. However, He-Huan couldn't handle such small bites. She lowered her eyes and let him bite, but her body was slightly tense. Qin Mo finally had enough. His chin rested heavily on her shoulder and his breathing deepened. Stay with me. I won't touch you. I'm leaving. He-Huan's voice was slightly trembling. This was Qin Mo. He could always be unclear when they had a falling out. Sometimes, she didn't even know what he was doing. When she said that she wanted to leave, he naturally wouldn't let her go. He bit her for a long time, and in the end, he actually got up and carried her into the bedroom. When he put her down, she was lying on the soft bed. He supported her head with one hand, his dark eyes locked onto hers, and his voice was low and hoarse. Stay with me. He-Huan turned her face to the side and didn't make a sound. However, there was a trace of tears at the corner of her eyes. Don't cry. His voice was slightly hoarse. He-Huan, you didn't come here to smash my car tonight to cry. With that said, he leaned over and bit the tip of her nose. Now, are you appeased? He-Huan still didn't say anything. She just turned her head and bit her red lips. It was the kind that bled. Her nose was red and her eyes were watery. Her voice was a little low. Qin Mo, you're bullying me. Qin Mo's slender fingers gently fell on the corner of her eyes, as if he was catching her tears. He-Huan didn't let the tears fall. At this moment, it was as if she had returned to that dark night. He approached her step by step, trapping her under his body like a trapped beast. The only difference was that she was not as afraid as she was that night. Perhaps it was because she sensed that he wouldn't hurt her. Her tears still fell. They were a little warm. He reached out to catch them and gently rolled them between his fingers. Don't cry. He did not know how many times he had said that word to her tonight. He only felt that she had come in a threatening manner, and he had made up his mind not to let her have an easy time. But now, seeing how fragile she was, his heart softened. He felt that he couldn't comfort her, so he lowered his head and kissed her eyebrows, her nose, and her lips. He-Huan was not a tall girl with long hair. She had short hair, was only 160 centimeters tall, and was very thin. But now, he only felt that she was delicate. She clearly had so much energy in her body in the past, but now he just wanted to protect her and comfort her. Qin Mo was originally caressing the corner of her eyes, but at this moment, he was aroused. He couldn't help but reach out to hold her short hair tightly. His other hand also did the same. He put his hands together and held her head, almost holding it in place. I want to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, husband, addicted to pampering. Talk about life and find a bosom friend. Recommend the urban guru Shinshu. Chapter 42-34. His dark eyes stared at her passionately, as though he was staring at a delicacy. He-Huan bit her lips so hard that they looked like they were about to fall. She had tears in her eyes, and her nose was red as she looked up at him. She seemed to have forgotten to breathe as she just stared at him. She was a little scared, but there seemed to be something else in her eyes. It was the kind of cautiousness one would have when they were startled by the past. She did not know what she was expecting. Just as she was being cautious, Qin Mo opened his mouth. His voice was unbelievably hoarse. I kissed you. It felt like it was the first time. The first time they kissed was on the night of their wedding. Before that, Qin Mo had never touched her before. He loved someone with such sincerity and cared for her so carefully that he did not want her to be tainted with any bad feelings. It was only at this moment that he seemed to recall everything. After Chin Mo said that, Hee-Hwan's body moved as though she wanted to struggle. However, he held her head firmly. He was still staring at her. After a long time, he lowered his head slowly and kissed her carefully. Their soft lips came into contact with each other. It was as though there was an electric current that could melt anyone. Hee-Hwan was still staring at him with her eyes wide open. She was clearly being kissed by him. She should have shown fear or something else, but she just did not move and allowed him to kiss her. Chin Mo kissed her for a long time. He paused for a while before brushing past her lips slowly, hinting at something. Then, he pried her mouth open. This kiss finally became passionate and uncontrollable. He did not look like he wanted to control it either. Hee-Hwan finally could not help but turn her head away and gasp for air. Chin Mo chased after her. Under her dark eyes, he bit her lips again. You still don't know how to kiss. Useless little thing. Perhaps sensing that she was not afraid, Chin Mo reached out and held her chin gently. He murmured, let's try again. After saying that, he leaned in and kissed her again. That night, he kissed her tirelessly as if he had a lifetime to teach her how to kiss. Chin Mo was good at kissing, but Hee-Hwan was not good at it. In their married life, she had always been passive. And he kissed her all the time, patiently and tenderly, but his body said otherwise. Hee-Hwan didn't know why he was enduring it, but her heart did soften a little. Later, she didn't know how she fell asleep on the bed. They didn't do anything. He just kissed her. Later, he brought her a glass of milk and fed her. She fell asleep. When she woke up, it was still not dawn. Her head was still a little dizzy. She raised her hand to look at the time. It was only 3 in the morning. In the master bedroom, the light was dim and yellow, like the soft moonlight. Chin Mo wasn't around, so it felt a little empty. Hee-Hwan slowly sat up and leaned against the headboard. She looked down at herself and saw that she had changed into her pajamas. Chin Mo did it for her? She got off the bed slowly and wanted to go get a glass of water. But when she reached the living room, she froze. The living room was dark, but she saw Chin Mo standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. He was still wearing the same clothes as before. He stood there quietly with a cigarette in his hand. He didn't smoke much and looked very bored. Hee-Hwan didn't want to disturb him and wanted to go back. But the moment she moved, he said, "You're awake? I want to chat with more like-minded people about new wife number 1, husband, addicted to pampering. Talking about life and looking for a confidant." Chapter 42-35. Hee-Hwan froze for a moment, but Chin Mo had already turned his head and was looking at her quietly. The cigarette between his fingers was still burning, and the smoke made his face a little blurry. She couldn't see his expression clearly. Hee-Hwan's lips moved. "I want a glass of water." Chin Mo stared at her for a few seconds, put out the cigarette, and walked over. "I'll pour it for you. Sit down and wait." Saying that, he turned on the lights. The room was bright, and Hee-Hwan realized that the living room had been cleaned up. The bloody gauze and shirts had been cleaned up. She knew that Chin Mo was a very particular person and couldn't tolerate messiness, but she wasn't like that. She didn't put on makeup during filming, and sometimes, she could wash her face the next day after sleeping in. Sometimes, she wondered why a picky man like him was so persistent with her. However, she wasn't persistent anymore. They were divorced, and the current situation didn't matter. Maybe after they had sex, he would still be President Chin the next day, and she would be Director He or Ms. He. Hee-Hwan let out a long sigh, not knowing why she felt uncomfortable. At this time, Chin Mo came over, handed her the glass, and sat down beside her. Hee-Hwan took small sips of water, as if she was thinking about what to say. Chin Mo seemed to know what she was thinking, and he reached out to stroke her hair. "It's too late, and my hands aren't convenient. I'll leave in the morning. Drink some water and go to bed." Hee-Hwan's mind exploded. "What about you?" She felt a little regretful after asking. Chin Mo looked at her quietly, and didn't make things difficult for her. He just asked in a low voice, "Hee-Hwan, have you ever thought about why you were willing to stay last night?" Hee-Hwan was stunned, not understanding why he suddenly said that. Chin Mo locked his eyes with her, and then he reached out and said inexplicably, "Do you really not like me? If you don't like me, we'll spend a night alone together. We're not husband and wife anymore, but you're still willing to lie in my bed and be kissed by me. Hee-Hwan, have you ever thought about what would happen if Rongyu treated you like this?" His voice became hoarse. "All these years, who has been in your heart?" Perhaps he had always thought that she didn't have feelings for him, even though she had said that she liked him. But she really didn't leave last night. At first, she was a little violent, but later, she still obediently bandaged his wound. There was something different in her eyes when she looked at his hurt eyes, which alarmed Chin Mo. He lied when she asked him if he was willing to remarry her. He didn't say anything because she was angry, but he didn't say anything. He didn't say anything because she regretted it and ran away immediately. He kissing her quietly for a long time, but she was obedient and she wasn't very afraid. Chin Mo really wanted her, but he was willing to take it slow. This time, maybe he would be more tolerant of her, as long as he had a little bit of confidence. This time again, and a little, and a little, and. He was almost certain that Huan had him in her heart. Chin Mo simply squatted down. This was another very submissive posture. He looked up at Huan, who was a little uncomfortable. Her fingers that were holding the cup were gripped very tightly. After a while, she said in a low voice, "I want to sleep." She put down the cup and wanted to get up, but her hand was held by him, and their fingers intertwined. Chin Mo, her voice trembled. "You can't force me." Chapter 42-36. Huan's lips trembled, and she turned her head away. She didn't want to answer him. Chin Mo stared at her for a long time, but he didn't want to force her. Yes, he could force her body, but he could also force her heart. He laughed at himself. "Sleep early. I'll sleep in the guest room." With that, he let go of her. Huan thought he would leave. After all, his expression was cold. But when he got up, he picked her up and carried her easily to the master bedroom, where he put her on the bed. This time, he didn't kiss her. Instead, he stared at her for a while. "Huan, think about why you came. Are you really angry at me? Or something else?" He asked her in a low voice, "If I didn't go to the restaurant, if I didn't ruin your blind date, and if I saw you with someone else and saw you approaching Rongyu, would you hate me even more? And would you feel a little satisfied with me now?" He said a lot, and she couldn't digest it. She just looked at him. Chin Mo bent down and kissed her. "I'll wait here for you to come back. Anytime is fine." At that moment, it was as if they had gone back to the past few years. He had also told her that he would wait for her here and she could come back whenever she wanted. Huan bit her lips, feeling very sad. It wasn't that they didn't love each other, but she didn't know either. So when he was about to leave, she put one hand around his neck and said, "Don't go." Chin Mo's body froze, and his dark eyes fell on her face. Huan didn't want him to look at her, so she put her face against his chest and said hoarsely, "Don't go." At that moment, she was very small, and it could arouse a man's desire to protect and conquer. Besides, he hadn't done it for a long time. He could have done it on the bed tonight, but he was afraid that she would cry. Now she was obviously inviting him. Huan wanted to do it with him, which was a great temptation for Chin Mo. His eyes became frighteningly deep, and he slowly held her waist with one hand. His voice was low and husky. "Are you sure?" She didn't speak. She just raised her head and kissed his neck and chin, stopping at his Adam's apple. She nibbled lightly, just like he had nibbled on her shoulder tonight. Chin Mo exhaled with difficulty. Huan had never treated him like this before. It was very tempting. It was hard to control one's emotions. At this moment, no matter how much he restrained himself, he was no longer a man. He hugged her and kissed her back. It was a deep and passionate kiss. Although Huan was a little stiff, she was trying her best to relax. Chin Mo's heart softened. He placed his thin lips behind her ear. "I'll be gentle." That night was probably the most open night they had since their marriage and divorce. In the past, even when they did it to the fullest, Chin Mo was still a little disappointed. Huan rarely took the initiative and always accepted it passively. But tonight was different. She wanted it as much as he did. When it ended, it was already dawn. He came a few times. If it weren't for the injury on his arm, he would probably have been more rough. Yes, he was gentle at the beginning, but then his tone changed. And she didn't need his gentleness. Chin Mo calmed down for a while and looked at her sideways. "I'll take you to take a shower." You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.